Just like Bruce said.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started with our workshop discussion. And first up, we have Bob McKesson to come and talk to us. I'll let you get an opportunity to give you a little speech, and then we can do some Q&A.
Okay, I want to make it clear to all of you that I'm here mostly to listen to you. In my background is a kindergarten teacher mostly. I'm on education and also on the early learning and human services committee as the assistant ranking member there. And I'd say kind of the biggest issues we're looking at is tweaking the public education funding. That's one thing. And the other is we've lost about 3,000 child cares in our state since in the last 4 years. And that comes from the Department of Early Learning, and I'd say 1 to 2% of those child cares needed to go away. They were bad actors, but I think we need to find a way to incentivize people to want to start a child care and have that as a viable business. So those are pretty much my priorities legislatively for this year. And also to hopefully get these transportation projects.
There we go. That's a
Very
good
good.
one. There we go. Now you're talking our language.
Now you're talking our language.
Are you saying not just the Spokane Valley ones?
Yeah. You want to open up for questions or comments, concerns?
No, I think you kind of hit it on the head with regards to our priorities being transportation. Harvard Road, the project that we're already kind of engaged in with regards to the additional northbound lane, improving the safety of both the on-ramps, third lane between Barker and State Line, and then either an overpass and or a additional interchange between Barker and Harvard. And, everybody in the community they ask about that every weekend that we're at the farmer's market in the summer, and I hear it constantly on Facebook too, and it's, those are our top priorities, I think, based on what we've talked about here.
I think it's vital that the decision makers realize that this isn't just affecting our citizens. There's a reason that the city, the fire department, and the school district came together to try to support this project. Because it impacts everybody, really, at the end of the day. And I think that with the continued growth that we're expected to have, with the continued growth that the valley's expected to have, it's just going to get worse. And, I talked to you a little bit about this earlier, but the other thing that we need to be realizing and looking at some point sooner than later is expanding I-90 to 3 lanes from Barker on. Because from 2 o'clock, it used to be about 3:30 that it would be backed up from Sullivan to State Line. And now it's kicking further and further back. On a Tuesday at 1:40 in the afternoon, I was held up at Sullivan, and it was all the way to I-90. So if we continue down this path, we're going to have some bad situations arise. And being able to provide these resources, it impacts all of us, really. Our city of Spokane Valley, and the community. So we appreciate any support.
Well, definitely. And it doesn't, here, the great thing, and probably the problematic thing too about what we want to do, everything's pretty interconnected, between what the city of Spokane Valley wants and what Liberty Lake wants, and just having good quality transportation so that we continue to attract business and people who want to live in our wonderful part of the state. So I don't think this has to be territorial at all. And I like that there's been some commingling and co-working together between the city council and the Spokane Valley City Council. And I know Mayor Higgins is pretty excited about that. And I expect great things, and if there's anything I can do to help that relationship grow stronger, I'm happy to do that. So,
Well, I think that, I want people to realize that, yes, there's a convenience level of having these projects done. But more importantly, I look at the safety issue.
Yeah.
I look at the safety issue from a citizen standpoint. I look at the safety issue from firefighter standpoint. You know, when you have the fire department on Country Vista at their new location, and if there's an emergency at the new middle school or in the river district, and you've got that traffic build up, it's gonna be a nightmare for them to get to in a timely manner. And the same thing applies to police, you know, near and dear to my heart. We want to be able to get to these individuals who need our help as quickly as possible. And with our growth rate, if we don't do anything, it's not going to happen.
Shane, if I could speak to that too, a prioritization of the projects would be important, I think, from a public safety standpoint. If Barker were, for instance, under construction, but the other two parts of the project are not complete, then the entire system, what we learned recently, the entire system could fail pretty quickly due to construction and some sort of major event. If police or fire need to get to the other side of the freeway, so I think as we're kind of going through it, I think we all agree Barker is really important, and so are the other projects in the Lake.
Yeah.
For the overall system working, that if somehow we just kind of keep our mind on the prioritization of and timing of when construction should happen on these, especially with the construction of a major high school going in, without too much time, that's going to clog up things enough right there.
Well, and I, you know, I agree with you. It's this. Hopefully, it's not going to be a territorial thing. This is going to be a good partnership. The encouraging thing is, you know, like the latest revenue projections from the state, we're looking at another $500 million in revenue, in state revenue, and I think there's we've had pretty good record. Senator Padman, Representative Shea, and I getting money towards transportation projects, and I think with this extra revenue, and now that McCleary is hopefully behind us, I don't expect that to be resurrected, but I think there'll be money there. It's just a matter of there's this, especially in long sessions like we're going to enter into in January. It's very, there's a lot of elbowing in, and that's not between members of our caucus. Actually, this really has a lot more to do with just who's in charge of like the transportation committee. And so I would urge you to get a hold of Representative Ed Orcutt. He's our ranking member on the transportation committee, and let him know what a priority these projects are. I know the city of Spokane Valley is going to do that too, and that might be a way for both of you to partner together and say, listen, here are our priorities, and because we're growing so fast, it's really important, not just for business growth, but even more important, safety, that we can get these projects finished, because if we don't, and then be very specific about what would happen if you were not able to get those. So.
Well, and I think it's, you know, obviously safety's number one, but also the missed opportunity of what can happen to the positive if it does go in. We've got, you know, all this undeveloped land along Apple Way and I-90 that could seriously increase and diversify our sales tax revenue, which is really what we rely on here.
Sure.
And without those projects, that's not going to happen. I've been here 12 years, and I don't think I've seen, maybe the consigned furniture building is new since I've been here, but that's really been it. And that's a long time without anything new along that stretch.
Yes, indeed. Do you have your tardy slip, Mr. Mayor?
Oh, I brought my council.
I'm sorry, my elementary school teacher, persona, just took over for a second.
I didn't get that much in trouble representing the council. Thank you very much.
It's good to see you.
Turn on your microphone.
Dan, we're opening it up to any questions that you have for him, or any ideas or comments, concerns.
Sure.
I share the observations of the transportation projects as our primary objectives here in the city. I recognize our efforts to try and increase access, specifically the bridge, we believe, at Henry Road and Third Lane on Harbor. So in my opinion, those are what I would like you to recognize or try and present as our objectives in Olympia.
Okay. Thank
And I'll just
you.
take a quick opportunity to tell you that you're still a celebrity in the Severs household, because you were a teacher when both of my kids went through there.
Oh.
And Mr. McCaslin coming out with his guitar.
I'm glad you
Appreciate
appreciate
that.
whatever it is to help
Thank
us
you.
out.
Got me right here.
That's right, yeah. There's your kindergarten days back.
That's great.
Absolutely.
Did you talk about the biggest challenges you think Olympia faces in the 2019 session?
Well, I think whenever there's another large amount of money that unexpectedly comes in as far as revenue, there's a lot of elbowing going on to see where that money is going to go to. And there's already, as soon as those revenue projections came out, I was hearing from a lot of, not just people in my caucus, but people in the other caucus too, basically starting to try to position themselves. And I think we've been really proactive with Mike Brebner to make sure that we've got these projects that are so important because of how fast our growth is happening. So, and I made it, I think, pretty clear too of how, between Spokane Valley and Liberty Lake, all of those things are connected in some way or another. So I think it's important for us to remember that. And even though I live in Spokane Valley, and so does Representative Shea and Senator Patton, that you guys are in our district too, and these are high priority things, and they're not just for growth, they're for safety too. So I think I will pass those priorities on to both of them the next time I see them. And
One of the things that in AWS, Association of Washington Cities, we had a regional meeting here just last week, I guess. And talked about kind of the AWC legislative needs and things like that. A lot of talk, a little bit in the conversation afterwards and maybe a little bit before was about tools. Tools that can help the city take advantage of new opportunities. For instance, even if, for instance, and let's just take, we have a lot of discussion on Henry Road right now. It's keyed up in the 2029 timeframe for delivery of funds. But one of the things that might be possible is could we bond to build the Henry Road and rely on those funds to pay it off, in 10 years, so that we can get it started get the development going and pay it off with those funds. I mean, that would be a tool that would be beneficial. I know that Senator Hobbs was here a month or so ago and talked a little bit about that to one of the groups. They need more tools to deliver these infrastructure projects. So that's one thing that may cross your. I mean, I know that he was trying to look at an alternative type transportation package or tools or things like that can get these things built. That's one. I know that AWC, again, they talked about the lift. We have 3 demonstration projects of lift, and they've been very, very successful. But extending that throughout the state, I think is going to be a priority for AWC. I know it's been a number of members there to look at that, because it's truly a very, very beneficial opportunity to develop and pay for the infrastructure. So those are the things that I see coming down the road. I mean, some people say, well, it's just it's not just money. When I come here, give me money so we can build this. Give me a tool so that I can help build. Do something a little bit differently. So.
well, and it's you know, if your citizens are willing to take on the bond, then that's the,
Well, I mean, again, it's the payback of the state money back in
Right.
in 2029, so that's the key. You know, I mean, it's like, yeah, you can create a bond, but here you, rather than wait 10 years
yeah.
to take advantage of a new infrastructure, you know, get in today or next year, or the year after. I mean, all the ways that we can kind of move the money forward, I think, and that's just not just for us. I mean, that's across the state. I know on the west side, they had this conversation with another legislator over there. It's the same thing. They want to do the exact same thing if they could for their community. They're in the mix.
Yeah.
2028 or 29, 30.
Yeah. Well, and if any things come up on my end that might be problematic, we'll do our best to communicate those things to you too, as things develop. You probably know, you know, transportation isn't where I'm more knowledgeable on. I'm certainly better at it than I was even a couple of years ago, but it's so if anything pops up, I mean,
It's a vote, you know.
yeah,
it's
the most
a vote.
important thing is to communicate with you guys too, so that you can advocate for your projects too,
Yeah.
and be able to get early into that line so you can come and testify before the transportation committee too.
Do you see more of the remote committee meetings taking place, you know, where they have the opportunity to talk?
Oh, we've been trying to make that happen in the House for real hard efforts in the last 4 years, and they don't want that. And honestly, I mean, they do not see any advantage to have more people from Eastern Washington coming to being able to testify before a committee in Olympia. And thank goodness in the Senate, they're not as, you know, they allow remote testimony. So I would like to see that, but that's more of working with the chief clerk's office and with staff, non-elected people. Those are the people that are basically controlling whether or not we can do remote testimony. And I think it's the best idea in the world to be able to do that. And that's how we can
Well, we'd be more
be
than willing
heard
to,
more.
you could go back and tell them, we're more than willing to host a remote testimony right here at City Hall.
Sure,
You know,
I'm sure.
Got the screens.
I'm sure Spokane Valley would be glad to
we'd love
invite
to
you
do that too.
to them too, you know, to do it from there. So it's not a matter of technology, it's a matter of willingness, to be honest with you, and willingness from people that don't have constituents to be answerable to.
Yeah. Well,
So,
we appreciate all you do.
thank you, I appreciate it.
Mayor, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So Representative McCaslin, thanks for coming. Like I said, we really appreciate you being here and having a conversation with our council. So I have a question. We are good partners with the Valley and with WashDOT, but what is the best way for us to get you information or others? Because I can only imagine that you get inundated with lobbyists. We, for the very first time, hired some lobbyists to help us because we don't have a presence in Olympia, as you
Yeah.
know, every day of the week. So we invested in that, and I want to underscore the partnership between ourselves, the fire district, and the school district in doing that. And I think they came and visited with you a week or two ago. And then I'm just assuming that emails and lobbyists, as you guys just get overwhelmed with wants. What is the best way for us to get you information?
It's definitely through Scott Staley, my legislative aide. He does not get overwhelmed.
Okay,
And he keeps, boy, we talk every morning about emails that he has forwarded to me, anywhere from healthcare to education, different.
is he here in Spokane?
No, yeah, he's in Olympia.
In Olympia,
So he's-
okay.
That's where our office is, and he's been at this for 25 years. He's got an amazing capacity. So email is always the best, and he keeps real close tabs on all local emails, especially from local governments, whether it's county or city governments in the area. So I've been very privileged to get to work with
Perfect,
Scott.
well,
He's
get
a
to know
good man.
Scott.
He is.
Another topic that's come up, and I know that Chief Front made us aware of this several months ago with regards to lack of funding for the police academy. It also came up at the AWC regional meeting
Yeah.
last week. And I know it is actually on AWC's 2019 legislative priorities, but if I remember correctly, it could be up to 24 months between if you're hiring somebody new, when you hire them, they can actually be out on their own, which is
Yeah.
a really hard thing for especially small cities like us to handle. Luckily, we've been very good with the Chief's Steel Cop program, and we've been really good at getting lateral officers. But when I think about the surrounding communities, the county, and Valley uses the county, and Spokane, I know they're all hurting. So at least to me, that's in addition to transportation, that's a really high priority. So I'm not quite sure where that falls or what kind of conversations you've heard about that, but. It is one of the top priorities for AWC at this point.
I haven't heard a lot about the police academy things. Now that state patrol people are paid a little bit better, I voted yes on their raise. Their training is amazing. They probably have the most comprehensive law enforcement training in the whole state, and they were being picked off by local police departments and sheriff's departments and so on. So they've got a little bit more stability there, and I think that will hopefully cause new recruits to want to go to some of the local cities, to be a police officer.
But I think
or a
that's
sheriff's deputy.
I think that's the big issue,
Yeah.
is everybody is hiring right now, because you have a lot of people
Yeah.
retiring.
Mhm.
And so you're gonna have to either get laterals, which people are now paying bonuses for people who
Yeah.
work for their cities. Small cities can't necessarily do that. So then your next option is an entry-level officer. And with Burien and Spokane Police Academy, they cannot meet the demand currently
Yeah.
for training. And this is gonna we're gonna get to a head real soon with an issue of being able to get officers on the street, because as the chief talked to us about it, from point A of that entry level to them being on the street on their own is about a year and a half at full level.
Yeah.
So this is something that we've got to get resolved sooner than
Yeah.
later.
Yeah, and that would definitely be something you bring to Senator Patton's attention too. I'm sure he's already aware of it, but he's on the Law and Justice Committee, so that could be very productive, because he's, being a former judge, is very acquainted with all of those things. So I will bring it up to him also myself. So
Yeah, I was going to ask you, why don't you bring it up to him? No pressure.
He's going to be here, Senator Patton's going to be here.
He's going to be
next
here,
week.
Senator Pan's going to be here November 20th, I believe. 20th.
And I think
Yeah.
the last thing, you and I discussed it briefly, and some people are going to feel like I'm a broken record, but currently, year after year, it's $20 billion that goes to the opioid epidemic. 20 billion, not million, billion in the U.S. And being on the education side, I think that you'll see the value in this, that doctors going through medical school currently get 1 hour through their entire medical school training for opioid abuse and addiction.
yeah,
1 hour. They're not trained properly. The DEA is not working cohesively with WSU and UW to give them the training, to give them the resources and the education on what they need to be doing better. And I think that we need to put a lot of pressure on the school system as well as the DEA to say, let's work cohesively together and stop pointing fingers and saying it's your fault. No, it's your fault. Let's bring the two together.
yeah. Well, and we finally have at least a better understanding that marijuana is a gateway drug, toward those kinds of things. And this is no longer, from back in 1977 when I was a freshman at WSU, I didn't know anybody who didn't smoke pot in my dormitory, quite honestly, my first year. So and my first roommate went into, had to go into a mental institution because of his marijuana use. He had a nervous breakdown. And so I'm, very familiar of how all of this works. I think the real thing that we also need to hit is, and I don't think it's the state's particularly their job to be telling parents how to be good parents. It has to come within the community and within our churches, and that's going to be part of it. But the other part of it, I love your idea about having a drug dealer being held responsible for a death of somebody who ODs.
Mm-hmm.
The needle being the
gun, the needle being the gun,
Yeah.
the drug is the bullet.
Yeah. So that's a possibility.
Well, and the other thing too that I brought up at the PWC meeting, we need to start putting pressure on our prosecutors, because this war on drugs is not getting us anywhere. This opioid epidemic that's all of a sudden happened, it's been going on for a long time. And I don't even like calling it an opioid epidemic because we're so far behind. We're just now paying attention to the opioid epidemic, but we're beyond that. We're talking about prescription drugs for attention deficit disorder, sleeping pills, a drug for diabetic neuropathy. Those are being abused now. So we're well beyond opioids. We're talking about prescription drugs, abuse in general. And if we continue to play this game of who's going to do what, we're not going to get anywhere. So the other idea that I encourage everybody to do is to put pressure on the prosecutors to say, our jails are so full right now. If it's a misdemeanor offense or gross misdemeanor offense, they're not going in there. We're red lighted at the jails. So police officer can't even bring them to jail. So if you have somebody that's addicted to opioids or addicted to heroin, you're still going to charge them. They're going to get a charge like they normally would. But giving them the opportunity to get into a treatment program, and if they're successful with that treatment program, that charge is wiped away. That's something we can do now. And that gives them motivation to get off those drugs.
Yeah, I think that's true, and we've got a shortage of those kinds of programs too, unfortunately.
But unfortunately, our prosecutors don't see how much value there is with this. And that's where we got to start first, is putting pressure on them.
I think Larry Haskell does, and he would be a good person to talk to, since he is our county prosecutor.
I know some people that worked with him, and they said that he's not so open-minded to it.
Oh,
I hope that he is. I hope they're wrong. I really hope he is. And I'd love to see it.
I would say Larry's probably the best prosecutor we've had in the last 20 years, for sure. And I think he's aware of how overloaded our prison system is.
Mm-hmm.
And there has to be a better way of dealing. And unfortunately, on the other side of the aisle, this whole idea of treatment has been put into overdrive, and I think if they had their way, they would be sending people without any consequences whatsoever. And that, how could we criminalize? Because they, honestly, the other side of the aisle does not really believe in any kind of criminalization of drugs or so many other things. We don't have enough time to talk about it, but I think it's again, we're going to have to be doing some things either through public education, through our churches, through social services that are actually educating kids from an early age. I grew up in a family where both my sister and both parents smoked until I was 10 when my dad stopped smoking. But I got great education at age 9 about what cigarettes do. And I had a real shocking picture of an autopsy where they pulled out somebody's lungs. So I have never smoked a cigarette in my whole life.
Well, I think that
Never want to.
I
So,
think that the education with the kids is important. I always support that, but I think the education needs to be with the doctors. I think that's where we need to be educating, because they're not getting enough of it. They're not being guided as to the major effects these medications have. And this is a whole different ballgame when you're talking about rights and wrong between smoking a cigarette and not smoking a cigarette. We're talking about a physiological change in your body due to how these medications work. People aren't waking up and saying, oh, I'm going to get addicted to opioids. I say that all the time. They don't do that.
I know.
It's 17-year-old kids that go to the dentist, and the dentist gives them 60 hydros for a tooth being pulled, and they're hooked on opioids within a year. It's cops, it's doctors, it's lawyers, people that are highly educated that are getting addicted to these because their pain sensories are on overload due to that physiological
I
effect.
know how that works.
So
Yeah.
we got to get more education to these providers on how these medications should be prescribed.
Yeah, and that's you're probably dealing with the FDA on that too. So
Absolutely.
I think there's definitely things that can be done.
I appreciate all your help
Oh,
to make it happen.
okay. Well,
No pressure.
yeah, well, I can't make any promises
I know,
there,
I
of
know,
course,
but
but
we can never
it's,
tell.
yeah. But, well, as my mom used to say, we'll go ahead and act like we have good sense.
That's right.
And I know that's all of your desire too, so I appreciate the opportunity to be here. And
We really
thanks
appreciate
for
you coming.
For your input.
Really appreciate you coming in.
Yeah.
We'll continue to keep up the conversation, okay?
Excellent.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay, so Mayor, we have, that's the Operation Maintenance and Planning and Engineering, they have a short update.
Okay.
We had a Centennial Trail Coordinating Council meeting last Thursday, and they handed us these maps. No, we did not pay $5 for them. No.
Is this a budget process? Any budget amendment?
Those did not make the cut with the city of Liberty Lake in them. We didn't quite get the agreement finalized before they printed, but they promised the next one will have our logo and information on it. So, just a quick update, what's happening in the world of operations and maintenance. It's fall, we have some beautiful fall color. And swale repair work continues with Stephen and his crew. They're actually working on the big swale of our own on Harvard and Wellington. It's been a mess for a while, and he's slowly chipping away at swale maintenance. Orchard Park, Trevor Reagan took this picture this morning. The pavilion stage is starting to look like a stage, minus the building. And Pavilion Park, just wanted to kind of, I've never really shared too much about what's going on up there. We have the brand new pump up there, it's working beautifully, but because we have the pressure we need now, we're definitely seeing quite a few breaks where the piping is weak. So the piping can't quite keep up with the new pump. So it's a good problem to have good pressure, but we definitely have it in the budget next year to replace the pipe, wire, and controller for Pavilion Park. And again, it's in the similar situation as Trailhead, where it's 20 plus years old and it's at its end of its life. So hopefully with the asset management software coming on, we'll put things like Rocky Hills irrigation system. It's only 6-7 years old at this point, but we'll see the time frame of 30 years, and we'll say, okay, in this year, we can kind of expect that we're going to need to replace the irrigation system at Rocky and Orchard and so forth.
Jim, when do you think you'll have that system up and running?
The asset
I know
management,
we just approved it, but what's your anticipated date of having that system up and running?
the asset management software is in the budget for 2019. So hope to purchase it January 1. So it'll take a little bit of time to gather the data and put it all together. But 19 will probably be the year to gather everything and really get the bones to the software, and then 20, it should be actively.
Thank you for correcting that. I thought we had already approved that. Obviously not.
It was the time card, I think, the
Labor task.
labor, the labor database to help us with time cards and et cetera. That
Oh,
was,
okay.
yeah, is that the one that, what's the name of that? Is it Cool Dudes?
Yeah.
Dude Solutions.
Dude Solutions, okay.
Facility Dude.
Sorry.
Okay.
So that'll be 2019. The repair, I think somebody had asked a couple of meetings ago about the monument, if I recall, at Harvard that was hit by a driver who's very, very fortunate to not have too many injuries, if any. But he had a medical incident, hit the brick, and it actually was repaired last weekend, and they did a great job.
Mhm.
And then we have our 26th annual Leaf and Beach Cleanup on November 10th and 11th in coordination with the sewer district. The city supports the sewer district, it's their event, but we support it. And our crews will be out on Saturday the 10th. And then I think last year was the first year we actually added River District. We formally added River District. So River District, our crews will start working there during the week, weekday hours on November 13th, so that Tuesday. And I think it took them a few days to kind of clean up there and get, so we'll advertise that very well so people are aware. And then an update on Trailhead. Everything that's highlighted there is a completed zone or irrigation hole down on the golf course. They're about a week behind schedule, but they're slated to have all the piping in before winter. And then come spring, they will install the rest of the wire, the controllers, and remove all the old heads. What's coming? You'll probably see on the agenda here in the next month or two a new agreement. It's a recreation agreement with Inland Chess. They want to provide after-school chess programs for kids at the library, and so we'll do a 3-year agreement with them, or 1 year, or whatever. We're trying to work everything out with them right now. We'll also hope to renew Skyhawks, Challenger Sports, and Tinkergarten, which are already agreements in place. Today, this afternoon, the very first Pavilion Park historical utility box wrap was installed at Pavilion, and they only got 1 box done. They're continuing on tomorrow, but I'll let the Parks and Arts Commission share the photos of that. But it's pretty neat because they use the historical photos, that like the ones that we're hanging back here.
Very cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Stephen and I are working on the snow removal flyer, and he is doing a write-up to prepare people for snow season on the city's splash page for November. So he'll do a little reminder of do's and don'ts, and please be courteous. And so we'll try to be proactive as much as we possibly can with our information, getting them, the citizens, blasted ahead of time, and then keeping them updated. We are going to be having an agenda bill coming up in the next month or two for the RCO land conversion. I don't know if any of you recall that. It's been a very long process, so many may not even be aware, because there are people that were here 2 years ago that aren't here now. But we hope to finally have that signed, sealed, and done, and to you for approval here in the next month.
What's the approximate location of that, Jen? That conversion?
So we're converting the Rocky Hill piece on the northeastern leg, and we're converting that with the Orchard Park piece.
75 feet wide, and it runs behind 4 homes.
And then on an agenda bill here in the future, I hope to have a security purchase for the security for City Hall. It's just a little over 5,000, 6,000, so it'll be in front of you for approval. And then the Parks and Arts Commission is working on application processes. We are already getting lots of requests, people wanting to do boxes, people wanting to donate art, people wanting to do this and that, and so it's too much, and so we will have a process to go by.
That's a good problem.
In fact, tomorrow, yes, it is a good problem to have. Tomorrow there will be, we hope to come to an agreement on the actual application itself. So once we have that, then we'll be able to hand that out to people, and there will be a process of how many pieces do we do a year. It's not going to be a free-for-all where we have 100 people want to do 100 boxes and we try and do it all we can. So it'll be like 6 boxes a year, or whatever it is they decide tomorrow. Is that it?
Lisa?
Didn't know how much time we would have this evening, so I have a written report for you, and I will try and be
This is for maybe official record.
Have questions that we don't get to tonight, and we're reminded.
Shade to your desk.
So, a couple things I just wanted to share with you, strategic plan status. So we did make the final graphic edits, and you'll actually find it in your council budget packet, because of course the strategic plan really did guide prioritization for that. We just today ordered a 24 by 36 foam board print of those that will be available for your dog and pony shows, as it were. It's unfortunate we didn't get it for the last farmer's market, but we'll have it as needed. And we are also printing out the 8.5 by 11 cardstock handouts. We're going to do about 50 of them to start with, and we'll see how that goes. We can certainly always supplement. Again, I just got the documents today, so we do also intend to print and frame the document for the entryway to City Hall or council chambers, and we'll have to figure out what the location that will be. We will be using the graphic icons for presenting the action plan for the strategic initiatives as the piece you haven't seen, and we'll put that into a several-page brochure that kind of completes the document. We'll make sure that we've printed it for you, for your reference, for staff, for their reference, and we'll have it available for the public that's interested. And finally, we'll get it posted on the website. So this is all happening within the next couple of weeks. As I said, I literally just got the final document today. So that's that. And part of what came out of the strategic plan was really capital facilities plan and asset management plan, and you're going to see a copy included in the mayor's 2019 budget. And obviously, the items that are funded in 2019, you're going to be adopting as part of the budget. But we will also have to adopt the 6-year capital facilities plan, and that's important because of our TIF and lift. And so we do need to do a SEPA review on that. We're getting that underway actually tomorrow. And we will need to have hearings for this that will run parallel with the budget hearings for November 6th and 18th. And then we'll do a separate ordinance to adopt the 6-year capital facilities plan. One of the things that we also will have to do is we'll have a section that amends the 6-year transportation improvement program, because with all the projects we have going on, there was a little bit of shifting just based upon what's realistic to deliver. And so we need to do that as well. So we'll bring all those forward to you. And I just wanted to take a moment to talk about this. It's a separate but integrated piece of the mayor's budget, but we do need this separate piece to adopt a 6-year plan. 2018 code amendment schedule. So we do have the workshop tonight on the 2018 or on the RV storage. In your package, you'll find some proposed revised wording to turn it into a conditional use permit, and it provides some standards for it. And so we'll be presenting that tonight. The one thing that I want to pause and say about that is that I'm hoping that you give staff some direction as to whether or not you want to consider what was proposed by the applicant, or whether you want to bring forward the proposed revisions to it, because they do have to get the SEPA going tomorrow on that. I have to get the notices out on that, and I can't notice it until I know the language is in the ordinance. So that, and then we'll be doing the hearing for that on November 6th. November 6th can be a long meeting, I'm sorry. 2018, or the street trees. So I just wanted to call out the fact that we've been working collaboratively, Jen and I and her staff, in terms of updating the tree brochure to provide a little guidance given the kind of consternation that arose from the Norwood Homeowners Association letter, and people were desperately in need of guidance. Our brochure had been updated, I think, in 2013, but it was still awfully prescriptive and heavy-handed, and so we updated that. And looking at that, we also discovered that the tree ordinance, that the brochure had been updated in 2013, but the trees hadn't been updated in the code. And actually, it's in two different sections of the code, one in the development code and also in Chapter 8, Public Facilities. And it was actually two different lists. And there were actually two different sets of regulations that were kind of similar but not exactly the same. Long story short, we have started the process of discussing updating that and making it a more practical, usable ordinance. We actually dipped our toe in the water with the Planning Commission at their last meeting in October and used it as basically the example of why we really do need to revisit our codes and that they do need to do some code cleanup. And so this is our first foray, and we're going to be workshopping it again in November, and the staff is going to continue to work on that. I will say that one of the things that we feel that is important to follow on the heels of that is the landscape code. And so again, we want to get to a place where it's more user-friendly, it's more practical from a long-term maintenance standpoint, as well as while still preserving aesthetics and whatnot. And so we'll be putting together an internal team with some external resources as well to help really do a good job and make certain that our code really says what it needs to say. So that's kind of the next step, yes.
So that would be a topic that I was going to bring up in our council report section for tonight, but
You only got about 5 minutes.
I'll bring it up there.
It's kind of what I said.
Thank you.
So, Planning Commission,
Good luck. Good job.
just to note that they're adopted in the faculty. I'm not going to talk about what they did. So there's the September meeting, we did talk about the tree ordinance this last one. And again, pending land divisions, we've got Rocky Hill North 4th Edition final plat that's coming forward. Likely on November 6th, Trutina 2nd Edition final plat, likely on November 18th. Hawkstone 2nd Edition, whenever they get around to bonding for it, that's been coming for a while. The Katera binding site plan for the 40 acres in the southwest quadrant of the city, that's the 408 multifamily apartments and 344,000 square feet of some future commercial. We don't know what that is. We're just, the comment period ends tomorrow. We will be doing a technical review meeting on Monday. That is an administrative decision, and basically if it meets the standards of our code, we don't have any options but to approve it. So that is going forward, that is in process right now, and we will be responding to all the public comments that we have received once the public comment period is closed and we've determined what the next steps are. Central Valley School District annexation, just wanted to let you know that we will be posting for that next week. And the SEQA review will also be getting underway and waiting for a SEQA checklist from the school district. Hearings on November 6th and December 18th with the earliest possible effective date for annexation, and February 16th or thereabouts, depending upon what the decision may be. And then I also have listed some other developments that you can take a look at your leisure. Public Works and Engineering, I wanted to mention that we have a couple contracts on the council agenda. So we do have a $26,500 contract with Parametrics for Mission Avenue sidewalk improvements west of the roundabout to one brook. And that was a gap in sidewalks that we talked about as being very important for the school. We also have $32,000 and change for new public works yard design with temporary fencing and temporary lighting. We may or may not do that with the temporary fencing commencing and temporary lighting, but it gives us the latitude to do that if that makes the most sense. We also are requesting council approval of 2 pedestrian crossing setups, one for Mission Avenue, one for Indiana. And finally, an invoice for $14,400 for trailhead irrigation design work. So that's our Public Works and Engineering Council agenda items. And Scott's in the audience, should you have any questions on those, but I did want to make certain that I paused there on the agenda tonight to see if you had any questions or any concerns about any of those that we could address now.
End of November for completion of the signal at Signal.
Yeah, so the signal at Signal, the big delay is actually in the signal arms themselves, and they're going to be delivered, and it should be, work's underway, but the signal won't actually be installed until November. The last thing I do want to mention is the Heights Overlay Project. So that was, the paving work was completed, but they do have a punch list of cleanup items and detailed work that they need to address, and they're going to be out starting tomorrow. It's probably going to be middle of next week before they complete the punch list of cleanup work that they need to do. But they are on the job, and they won't receive payment until they address those issues. And last thing, the Trailhead Irrigation Project is approximately 30% complete, progressing well, as Jen had mentioned. So that's on the Public Works side of the house.
Okay. We're going to be taking a break here for about a minute and a half, but before everybody gets up, and I wanted to get this out in case anyone has to leave, there is a Meet the Candidates discussion this Friday from 6 to 7:30 at Liberty Creek Elementary. This is going to be for candidates for the state representative position in the 4th Legislative District with Mary May and Ted Cummings, and actually Mary May's in the back here. So you'll get a chance to meet her as well as the other candidate, and there'll be some opportunities for the audience to ask questions. And yours truly will be moderating it, so come watch me screw up, if for nothing else.
Really good.
Yeah, community.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. There you go. How about citizen comments? Yeah, 3 minutes after the hour. We're open for citizen comments. Otherwise, you have to wait till the end. Oh, there you go. There's one. Thank you.
Do I need to say where my address is?
Just your name and just your name.
Okay, I'm Jolene Messina, and I just want to say that this is, everywhere I've lived, St. Louis to Maple Valley to here now, I try to get involved with the city governments where I live because it's very important to me. The city of Woodbury Lake is extremely unwelcoming to minorities, any kind of, I mean, just look at the prayer here. I know we have Sikhs in the community, I know we have Muslims. I'm atheist, and I considered not coming tonight once I saw on the agenda that this was on it. I've had lots of trouble with the library. I'm a privileged person, I'm a cisgender woman, but the LGBTQ, I know they're in the community, but they're not represented anywhere. They have no safe place. The libraries are supposed to be safe places, places where kids who are having maybe trouble at home can go to the library and find books about themselves. They're not there. There's difficult, I speak English, and I have a child care provider that speaks Spanish. She's from Mexico. She's here legally on, a J3 visa, but I'm scared every day that she'll be pulled over, not have her visa, and my kids will be with her, and then she'll be taken in or something like that, because this city is so unwelcoming, and she's discriminated against because she speaks with an accent and is learning English, and I'm very sad to live in Woodbury Lake. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments?
Neighbors, staff, council, and mayor, Tom Sulbert from the Woodbury District. Joe, I look forward to talking to you if you follow up on that message I sent you. Two things. First of all, I apologize that the email that I sent you had a link that didn't work. I checked all the links for the research on officers per thousand, and if you check the last one, the International Association of Chiefs of Police, or IACP, is what I'll say from now on, for page 2. Their recommendation is 2.2 officers per thousand. That is current, that has been consistent, but it is not detailed like the other things that I sent you. The FBI Uniform Crime Reports, UCR, the other information that came from other studies is more relevant, and it has specifics to small cities as well as large cities. And all I want to do at this point was just make sure that if I can find a link on that IACP, I'll send it to you for your considerations during the budget time. I'm encouraged to see that the mayor has included an additional police officer this year. There are at least two people, one is absent right now, who sit on the council, who understand why I'm saying these things. I negotiated for the cities against the WC, sorry. But it was during a time that Spokane was going through some difficult times. That's when we lost our downtown, and when we lost the ability to be able to be proactive instead of reactive. So I'm going to be very encouraging to all of you to have good consideration and get past the one officer per thousand thing that we seem to be kind of stuck in. There are some places that can do more with less, but that's because they have different partnerships with the state patrol and the county. Liberty Lake is already showing some of the signs. Jen has given us a report already of graffiti. We have an increase in property crimes. Brian gave us an August report that should have shocked everybody in the room, and it is the first of the tremors that are coming. And if we don't get ahead of it, then you can't be proactive. You'll be reactive, which puts the officers in the situation where they're going to be report takers instead of preventive, proactive people. And yes, I was a police officer for 25 years in the city of Spokane, so I look forward to your discussions, and I promise not to get up anymore. The only other thing, and I have 51 seconds to say it, is please consider approving the free sculpture that was generously given to us in your section 5 at the end of the meeting tonight. Thanks.
Thanks. Other comments? Once, twice, 3 times? Moving on. Proclamation. What did RJ?
RJ, do we have the proclamation?
We have, I'm sorry. So, you're stuck with me.
I was ready for ordinances, I wasn't ready for proclamation. A proclamation of the City of Liberty Lake, Washington recognizing October 2018 as Domestic Violence Action Month. Whereas the City of Liberty Lake is a proud sponsor of Domestic Violence Action Month, and whereas Spokane County has close to 4,000 confirmed victims of reported domestic abuse every year, and approximately 1 in 3 women and 1 out of 10 men are victims of domestic abuse. And whereas domestic violence is widespread and devastating to society as a whole because it is not confined to any group, but crosses all economic, racial, gender, educational, religious, and social barriers. And whereas law enforcement fields over 14,500 calls related to domestic abuse every year, resulting in 3,300 perpetrators being prosecuted annually, which accounts for 25% of all crime cases. And whereas domestic abuse is also a crime against children, with over 2,000 children having been witness to or victims of domestic abuse related to crimes annually. And whereas victims should have access to support and programs that are knowledgeable, trauma-informed, and compassionate to their needs as victims. And whereas victims of violence should have access to medical and legal services, counseling, emergency, and transitional housing, and other supportive services so that they can escape the cycle of abuse. And whereas our emergency responders, police, and judiciary should have the training and resources necessary to enforce, prosecute, protect, and rehabilitate perpetrators of domestic abuse in order to improve the rates of 1 in 3 perpetrators reoffending. And whereas we believe we can bring an end to the high rate of family violence in the City of Liberty Lake through education, awareness, and by taking a firm stance against domestic abuse in our community. And whereas we believe that this effort must include law enforcement, criminal justice agencies, school, churches, social welfare agencies, public health, and every individual citizen. And
Now therefore be it resolved, the City Council of Liberty Lake does hereby proclaim October 2018 as Domestic Violence Action Month throughout the City of Liberty Lake, and encourages all citizens to participate in efforts to recognize the serious impacts of domestic violence upon our community and families, and to actively work towards eliminating domestic violence in our community and our state, dated the 16th day of October 2018. Where's my guy? On behalf of the city, present you the proclamation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And if you can make some comments, I'd
Sure.
appreciate it.
Thank you very much. My name is Chuck Teagarden, and I'm with the Spokane County Domestic Violence Coalition. We really appreciate this effort that's being made by all of you to recognize October as Domestic Violence Action Month. We hope that next year we're going to have a county-wide domestic violence conference, and we'll, of course, be inviting your law enforcement along with everybody else, and victim services, citizens, because the problem of domestic violence, unfortunately, has gotten worse year after year here in Spokane County. So we really appreciate your willingness to do this, and we'll keep you posted as we make some progress in this regard. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, local business spotlight. Raise a Beagle in Liberty Lake Veterinary Center.
I guess that's me.
Thank you.
My name is Julie Clark, and I am a veterinarian and the owner of the Liberty Lake Veterinary Center down the road, and also the Crazy Beagle, which is the drive-through coffee shop in the front. I didn't really realize this was like a big presentation, so I just have a couple minutes of things to say. I love Liberty Lake, I really do. The people here we've been here about 12 years. I was across the freeway over at Otis Orchards before that. And the people are really nice, and everybody loves their animals. And I couldn't be happier with a lot of things in Liberty Lake. Business in my veterinary clinic has increased by 85% in the last 4 years. And I've just been the one in charge for the last 4 years. Lots of changes going on, but it's crazy. And coffee shop's doing really good too. They're up about 100%. I buy my own coffee at Costco because I think they're too expensive. But a lot of people go through there every day. And the girls tell me at 5:30 there's 3 or 4 cars waiting in line. Amazing. So anyway, thank you for all that. So that's all positive. I do have a couple negative things I have to say though. It's been very challenging here, trying to expand, to keep up with my business. I have 18 parking spots right now, and every day I have 12 or 13 employees. And that's just at the clinic and a couple at the coffee shop. So I do not have enough parking at all. In fact, when I came yesterday morning at 9 o'clock, I had to park over across the street at Alton Tires, which isn't Alton Tires anymore. So I've been working the last year trying to get more parking, and you guys have been really hard. It's been enough to pull my hair out. There's one gal I want to recognize, Lisa Key. I don't even know where she is. She was great with me, but I love my contractor. And I think he's trying really hard to keep costs down, but you guys have way too many regulations. This is crazy. I had 4 different meetings that I came to, and I know that he had more with the planning commission, going back and forth, and you guys wanted, this 6 inches more than this way and this other way, and then my driveway was like a foot too short in order to add more spots, and when I took away greenery, I didn't have enough greenery. And when I look around the town, I have more greenery than I think Home Depot does. And they have 100 parking spots. And I realize you keep adding more rules, but you're killing my business. We finally got approved last week. And after going back and forth, and my contractor, I do believe he's keeping prices down, and I think it's you guys with all your rules and regulations. For me to add 14 parking spots, it's going to cost me $81,000. And that's a lot of vomiting cats, I have to see. And I kind of judge things by that, and that's more than my doctors make, working full-time, and this is for parking spots, and that is crazy. And I end up, the plans have me going kind of behind I don't know if anybody's been to my clinic there, but I sit against the wooded area there. And I own quite a bit of the land behind the wooded area, and it kind of goes back and straight up. And so the plan has me building those 14 spots there, and finally got it all approved, and I was so happy. And then when Mark, my contractor, came over, he says, well, you're not going to be very happy because the city drew in bushes in the back. And they want me to do landscaping, which nobody in the whole world will see. And they want me to pull out native trees that are beautiful back there, huge, for me to put in irrigation and have your bush tree or whatever you guys want that aren't even native. And that is crazy. And I know that added at least $10,000, $15,000 to me to pull out native trees, to put in your special trees in the back that nobody is going to see. There will never be homes behind there. It goes up too much, nothing, it doesn't make any sense. So I did call and I talked to Lisa Key, and I told her how I was mad, how crazy it was, and she said, well, we can bring it back, and you guys can, we can see about that, maybe the native trees, but it shouldn't have come to that, and I don't need to pay my contractors to go to more meetings with you guys and pay my engineers to start over again, and it's very frustrating. Parking lot doesn't do anything for my business. I'm trying to work out a deal with them, the empty lot next to me, to allow me to park temporarily for a couple $100s a month, no more than 8 cars at a time, and that's been hassle too. And I just think we should work together. If somebody wanted to park at my house, I'd let them. I'm not going to charge them $200 and require a $1 million liability in case something happens. It's only going to be for a month and a half. I don't think we're friendly among ourselves, and I haven't been happy with all this stuff with you guys. My brother asked me about buying the lot next door, and I have to be honest, I said no, because I wouldn't work with Liberty Lake again. And I'm sorry, I love it here, I love the people. I can't afford to have land here, so I live out in Spokane Valley, because I want my goats and everything, but it's too much. A couple of years ago, I was putting some signage up, And I'm not allowed to have any signage on the front of my veterinary clinic because my little, I don't know what it's called, that little thing in the ground. Yeah, that's taken up all my signage, and it's only like this tall. So I have no sign that says Liberty Lake Clinic, but I'm not allowed to. And then at my coffee shop, I wanted to put 2 little signs, one on each side that said coffee. And they're 12 inches by 18 inches. They're like this big. And they cost me, I think, $70 each to make. And I had to decrease the size of my bigger one in the front, and then I had to get not just 1, 2 separate permits. And I want to say they were $60 each for the 2 identical signs. That's crazy. They were identical, and they cost me as much as it had me to make the signs. And then I had to decrease the sign that said Crazy Beagle, and literally by like 8 inches, because you guys are out there measuring. And that's not business friendly. So, anyway, I love Liberty Lake. I'm sorry to say anything negative, but my girls work here all the time, and you guys need to know, it needs to be more business friendly. I think that, you know, I have 26 employees over there, you know, so I'm paying my taxes, and I kind of expect you guys to work with me a little better.
Appreciate the feedback.
I'm sorry to be
We
negative.
need to hear these things so we can do
appreciate
some changes.
Yeah, I mean, it's when I keep getting these things back, oh, we have to do this again. It's like, are you kidding me? Irrigation to put in non-native plants? That doesn't make any sense. So, just common sense instead of follow by the letter.
Thanks, Julie. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Sorry.
Doctor,
Yes, I'm sorry.
Lisa and I will talk about this tomorrow.
Okay, great. And like I said, she's been great, and she told me get back, but
We've been going through some changes. But the other thing is, I want to recognize that you did get a 100% increase on your coffee stand.
yes, I did, and I've hired more doctors.
85% increase on your animal
Yeah.
portion. And the fact is, my wife loves your coffee and Crazy Beagle. So
But, yeah, no, I'm glad business is going so good, but parking, you know, I can't keep growing. I would have to move somewhere else if I didn't have this parking, because,
again,
Thank you.
we'll discuss all those issues. Wow. See, I start reading this book here, and I got about 500 pages in it. So it's an opportunity to address the council and our community about our budget for 2019. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the budget, and I don't know, did they get copies of this?
Yeah, there are copies, I believe, over there, and then they're also in the budget binders.
Yeah, please feel free to grab our strategic plan. There we go. So, this started, I think Bob brought this to us almost 18 months ago, 19, 20 months ago. And in 2000, or January of this year, Rick Romero came out and talked about pillars and the creation of a strategic plan by the city of Spokane. And through that, we worked through, as a council and administration, to try to come up with our strategic plan, and that will guide us for the next 10, 15, 20, 30 years. But how it relates to the budget, and that's one of my conversational topics, is we created a budget as a nexus to a strategic plan. So what's in the budget should be beneficial to the strategic plan or guided by the strategic plan, and the strategic plan should guide us as to where our priorities and spending should be within our budget. We're using 4 pillars in our budget to meet the needs and achieve our goals. One of them is a vibrant economy and a business environment. Investing in GSI and the Valley Chamber. Those are our local chamber of commerces that we depend on to help our businesses grow, learn from, and be advocates for us throughout the region and actually in Olympia. In 2019, we anticipate that both GSI and Valley Chamber will be using this chamber right here for business and entrepreneurial development classes, so that it will help those that have an issue do better, those that want to start a business succeed, and to get general knowledge. We this year entered into an agreement with Spokane Valley Fire Department and Central Valley School District for lobbyists. And our lobbyist team will be over to Olympia, targeted by Henry Road, Harvard Road, and the I-90 corridor, because that's critical to our business success and development here. Again, it's a partnership, and underneath the vibrant economic and business environment, that partnership succeeds. And then we focus on LIFT, which is Local Improvement Financing Tax. It exists over north of the freeway, and to drive our commercial, residential, retail environment. So there we're utilizing those funds to help facilitate the infrastructure development around the Henry Road. Safe, active, engaged community is another piece of our, or another pillar. We're investing in additional police personnel in 2019. But we're also partnering with the sheriff. And we're partnering with City of Spokane and City of Spokane Valley and Fairchild Air Force Base for resources. If we have a significant problem, it's not just our 2 or 3 guys in our shop. It's got a whole flock of people. That's how we can be good stewards of the taxpayers' dollars, by creating these good, solid partnerships and interlocal agreements. Our library board is seeking to expand its services and events under the direction of our newest library director, Jocelyn, and to meet our growing city needs. We talked about levels of service a number of times during our discussions in our strategic planning process. And sometimes they may or may not make sense. Sometimes you need 1 square foot per so many people. I can't remember exactly what it was for the library in the state. Does that make sense? What kind of a service are we delivering? How are we trying to relate to our community and our kids and so forth? It's not just a square foot, it's a program. And so I think our new our board of trustees, our new library director, is really going to seize on that in 2019. Sustainable resources. The city runs on 2 things, paper and money, and people, 3 things. But resources, we've talked about property tax. Our property tax, and I think is being reported by RJ, is the lowest within the region. The city's piece, right? We will take I'm proposing a 1% increase in our property tax, but it's an ongoing thing. A lot of people say we don't want to take it. It's part about being sustainable. And even with that 1%, the mill levy, $1.48.
$1.47.
$1.47.
$1.47 is what we're going to come up with.
That's the estimate, correct.
And but it's down from $1.
So currently it's $1.59 per thousand.
Right, so $1.59 this year, and in 2019 it's $1.47. That's 12 cents, even with the 1%. So they did get a property tax decrease. That's based on growth. We've dedicated our utility tax to roads. And, you see we're completing the Heights project. There's another section over on the north side that's scheduled. We've completed Liberty Lake Drive Road and Apple Way. We're trying to keep up on all of our roads. Our new roundabout over on Mission, and we're putting in, and then we're looking at rebuilding Mission and again, that utility tax is dedicated just for that. You know, it doesn't go anywhere else, it's spent all the funds. We have the, through Katie's leadership, Transportation Improvement Board, Tim Butler, you know, we're looking at that for a grant to repave Harbor Road, Harbor Bridge. You know, so, and we've been successful in Appleway, Limerick Road, one of the roundabouts, both the roundabouts, I think, and a pedestrian bridge. So all those things came from our partnerships with TIB, utilizing other resources. Harvard mitigation plan, when you build a new building, or somebody builds a new building, they pay into the mitigation plan, which means that they're putting it into the infrastructure to service your business, making sure that the people can get to your business. You'll find them a parking spot, but they'll get to your business. The Aquifer Protection Plan, we took that in-house here about 4 or 5 years ago. That provides some resources, stormwater. And then we've looked at in a purchase of a piece of property up here on the east side of Legacy Ridge, 20 acres, Dan, isn't it? We took that off housing, a very difficult place to build it. We're trying to turn that into a park and for a conservation area and a connection to the conservation area and trails for our community. We paid off debt. We continually pay off debt. Well, there's 2 more payments left, right? So basically,
2 years, it's called 2 years, not 2 payments.
Well, there's
Double the payments, yeah, for
yeah, there's one. We have a payment, two payments on 18, right? 168,000.
Yes, so you've got 168,000 this year, with 1 more payment to make on that, 2 payments next year, and 1 payment
Yeah.
the following.
So, and then we're totally out of debt. Zero debt. But we also have $15 million in assets. This building, the 6.5 acres, trailhead, the library. So we've tried to make sure that our resources are sustainable, that our asset base is well managed. But it's all kind of based in the strategic planning process. You know, we've restructured a healthcare plan to the benefit of the city's staff and well-being of the employees. But to a greater extent, it really saves our city money. Today, we changed the way we're offering we're paying for the healthcare at AWC. But it's significant, about $150,000 savings, I think, like that. You know, but looking at it from a strategic standpoint, how we can save our community, city money, so we make their tax dollars go farther. Quality facilities and infrastructure. We've upgraded City Hall. Look at, we now have TVs, microphones, stuff that really make a difference in our meeting capacity. You know, we have better internet access today and better equipment. We have a fully functioning street department with Steve and his crew, Stephen and his crew. You know, we've got a road grader out here, we've got lifters out here, we've got a mini-X, you know, and we're able to do our own snow plowing now. So we're much more responsive to the snow and the problems in the wintertime. But we're also much more cost efficient, having that in our own ballpark. Our Parks Department has expanded to increase an ever-expanding parks of trails and parks. The Parks and Park comes on board in 2019. You know, Jen and her crew, I think they're almost up to the salary side of the police budget. Just to let you know, they're pushing it because they just have so many people out there working on their behalf to make this place clean, green, and beautiful. Talked a little bit about our relationship with WashDOT at the earlier part of the meeting, and to boost our design and funding for Harbor Road Bridge, the connection to the freeway and the Henry Road interchange. It has never been better. In the years that I've worked for DOT, under leadership of Mike Berger here on the east side, it has never been better, and we've been very successful. I think even in this budget, there's a $800,000 check that came in for design. So the leverage there is working to help facilitate these transportation needs. We've had traffic studies over the last 6 years, well, 4 or 5, and we're planning a very comprehensive traffic study along Country Vista in 2019. They've paid huge dividends. Because without those, you can't get money in grants. Without those, you don't really have an idea how the system is going to work in the long run. To make it more palpable to your business. Because if I can't get a break in traffic, I can't turn in. And finally, one of the things that we have an opportunity to do in 2019 is the last mile of connectivity in transportation, public transportation. And so we've talked and we're looking at a grant for DASH. So we have internal circulation. So that sometimes people that live here don't need to take their car to work or golf cart. They can get on the DASH and pop to work or pop to the restaurant, etc. We're exploring, City of Spokane did the line scooters and bikes. I know that Dan's had the opportunity to do that. But I've invited the line people to at least make a presentation to our council in this winter or early spring 2019, depending on how the experiment in Spokane works out. But it's all because I think we have a good, successful city, because rather than just in our head we had the plan, now it's down on paper. I want to, again, Councilman Moore, I mean, this was your baby. You drove it. And I think it's really beneficial to us as we move forward. And finally, the motto is safe, clean, and green. We commend our police department. It may not be the correct number of people, right, per study. I did go through the check items. I got through those sites. But I think a lot of times is what's our goal? Are we staffing and utilizing all of our resources to achieve whatever that goal is? It's less crime, less graffiti, whatever. And this year we put in $25,000 or $30,000 for more sophisticated cameras. My plan for next year, at least for the police cars, is to make sure that those cameras are tied to an iPad rather than just your police computer, so that it's easier for the officer to see on a regular basis and not get confused with some of the other stuff. Because the more we can connect the community and our officers and the technology together, the safer we will be. With our staff here, it's Katie and our new Lisa P. and Jen and RJ and Ann and Tate, Tricia, and down in the building block, our new guy, Scott, Scott Bernard is our new engineer. Our newest librarian, all the people over there. I mean, we are delivering cost-effective service to you in this budget. And we go through it line by line. Not just here's a jumble of money, there's a line item budget. You're more than welcome to look at it on the internet or on our website. So, some people may disagree, but I firmly believe that what we've done here as a city, as a community, calls us out to be Spokane County's premier address. I believe that. All in this together. The council, myself, and the staff are out there working for the public to make sure that this is a very welcoming, beautiful, friendly, clean, safe city. On behalf of the crew that helped put this together, I presented these binders to the council, and we'll go through the discussions over the next, I think normally takes us about 6 to 8 weeks, and we'll pass the budget, and we'll continue on with public speak. Okay, thank you. So, donations. The library board's here, I know. I see Carol.
Luke.
Luke. Oh, there's two.
She just takes pictures, I just real quickly wanted to thank the city for their involvement in our function this afternoon for Town of Logan, the retiring library director. It had every aspect of her personality. It was warm, it was caring, and it was compassionate. It was positive and it was upbeat. And it laid the groundwork for the future for Jocelyn to take us forward. So thank you to the city for your involvement in supporting that event. It was a fun couple of hours spent here. And I know Pamela was just tickled beyond belief. Saw people she hadn't seen in years. So thank you very much.
Anything from the Parks and Arts Commission? There you go.
Hi, Lena Schutz, Parks and Arts Commission. We have a couple updates. The first is on your agenda for tonight, and that is the statue donation. I don't know how much you guys know about it. We were approached by Jerry Jaber. He's the co-owner of Hagedorn Corporation, and he wanted to donate a sculpture to the city of Liberty Lake. It is called Family Pieces. It's an impressionistic sculpture by Richard Warrington. He's known all over the world, and it's appraised at $26,000. The commission is thinking of some possible locations like City Hall or the library, so we can get you guys that information if you guys approve the donation tonight. We are also working on a project called Story Walk in conjunction with the library and possibly Friends of the Library. It is a project in which kiosks would be put along trails, and pages from books would be inside each one, and you would read a story with your family as you went along the trail. 5 books have been picked already by the former library director, and they're all beautiful, beautiful artwork. All of them are about getting out in nature and exploring and really fun things like that. We are talking with Spokane Valley Tech about doing all of the work for us. They would love to actually have a project in which they can work on it and actually take it all the way through to the end. So we would just be looking at getting supplies for that project. We're thinking about 2 locations, possibly one on the north side, maybe along the trike path in Orchard Park, and then maybe by Trailhead Golf Course or somewhere where there's a nice trail that families frequent often. Let's see, we are getting ready to do a call to artists for utility box wraps. We are going to extend it to just local artists, so Greater Spokane area, Northern Idaho, Liberty Lake, and call for submissions, and then we will look at those and choose a couple designs. We're also working on some housekeeping, some forums and such, and we've had a lot of businesses come forward and want to sponsor utility boxes, things like that, and we're trying to figure that process out and what that looks like for the commission. And then lastly, we are doing some research on some potential sculptures for the city of Liberty Lake. Potentially in our parks, and involve our goats potentially, or golf themes. We're trying to get some quotes and get an idea of what that looks like. Thank you.
It's amazing.
Let's see, the planning commission, anybody here from the planning commission?
Yeah.
No, anything? Are we gonna do that later? Stop, okay. So, sewer water district.
So Bill Genoway from the Seward and Water District. Just a couple of projects we're working on. Green Ridge HOA, we're gonna extend water up there. Grand Vista Estates used to be Crown Liberty, we're gonna extend water to them. We're working with those different areas. First phase of the east side Liberty Lake consolidation is done, and we're looking into the second phase. The old fire station is complete substantially. If you want to go on a tour, it's kind of a neat place to go and see what we've done over there. So we've added the lab and we've added some other resources. It's kind of interesting to see how the process works in the treatment plant. And the reason I bring those up is that, you know, you were talking about your goals and things, and it's kind of interesting that we provide, you know, safe, clean water supply, and everybody wants it. You know, it's just, we have such a good system that people come to us and say, can you help us out? So we're kind of blessed in that area. For a small district, we provide a pretty nice service for this community, and we're kind of proud of that. And if you go up Valley Way, there's a pump station on Valley Way. It just got remodeled, so if you happen to go up Valley Way, you'll see it. It's kind of a cool little pump station. Anyway, so that's all I have.
Thanks. Bill, wasn't there some recognition for the East Side Improvement District?
Is there recognition?
I think there was, yeah, awards or recognition related to it.
Yeah, we've had some of those. It was a collaborative. Those people wanted out. You know, the East Side, they had a system that was really bad. I mean, it was so when they kind of came to us and said, "Could you help us out?" We got some money, we got some loans, did some magic with the numbers, and they couldn't give it up quick enough. And we're kind of seeing that with Green Ridge, the same deal. I realize you're outside the city limits, but it's still all of our sewer district, and that all helps. And we're doing some other things around the area that are going to be, in the future, you're going to see some expansion, maybe some annexation of our district. So it's a growing little district. Oh, and by the way, I just got back from the East Coast to look at the trees, you know, the foliage. They don't have anything on us. You want to see leaves? It's right here.
That takes us to city council reports.
Not necessarily a report, but a request. I was wondering if there would be any interest from the council on adding a very informal workshop between now and the next meeting to just kind of do a roundtable, not sitting up here, but a roundtable discussion. We all bring our budget binders, go through, ask each other's questions, and if we can have Artie there, that'd be great. If not, maybe we can just go through some small discussions. My suggestion would be to hold any major policy or major decisions, just maybe note those for the next meeting, but I know a lot of people always have a lot of line item questions about, you know, what's included and what's not, you know, what bias number changed this year, where did which line or which page is the money on this year. So I just kind of want to get a feel for people's interest and maybe throw a date out there of the 30th, because we do have 2 weeks between now and our next meeting.
I'd be interested.
I love the idea.
So what do people think about the 30th? It's the day before Halloween, 2 Tuesdays from now.
I'm good. Works for me. Good.
Okay, now for time, I know some of you are a little bit more flexible than probably Dan or I, but could we hit 5:30, or is that not doable?
For 6.
Could it possibly be earlier?
I have a general meeting for the lacrosse team at 7, but...
Well, and I would propose we keep it fairly short, maybe to an hour and a half. You know, and if somebody has to come later or leave early, you know, very informal is what I'm thinking.
You think at 5:30 might work for everybody?
Alright, so if that's good, so the 30th at 5:30 here in City Hall, and like I said, if we can just do our regular white tables out here in the middle, we can all sit around a circle and exchange notes. Thanks, guys.
Good.
Just to capitalize on the conversation that Lisa started earlier. So it's more of a thought or more like a workshop request maybe, at least I'm kind of asking you for some guidance here, but something that's popped up the last few months is where I'm driving by Orchard Park every day and I'm more or less just curious about the inspection process on landscape materials that are coming in, inspection process on sidewalks as they're being poured, and some of those pieces. I'm also thinking about around, I'm really curious on street trees and some of the inspection process there as those things get installed. Are they installed at proper depths and those sorts of things? Because once they're installed by the developer, the homeowner takes over responsibility. That tree dies next year because it got planted 6 inches too deep. It's I honestly just don't know what the process is. And so I'm wondering if we could have a workshop and when it might be appropriate to talk about some of the street tree things that you guys are finding there. And maybe the inspection process. And one thing that's popped up the last few years is just the building inspection process and some of those pieces too. Shane, you brought this up a few times on the hiking side. Not that we didn't get down to that level of detail, but
I think it would be valuable if I may,
Yep.
One of the things that we're finding is that we have been really good on certain inspections, and other inspections we have maybe not as much. And so we have a new team, and working together with the building and planning and our new city engineer, we are looking at those very things. There are gaps in what has been inspected, and so we want to. We do need to refine that, and we are looking at that. That is one of the procedural things that we are going to be refining over time, and we're catching up as fast as we can. Love to do a workshop. Love to hear some input on where you perceive that there may be some shortcomings, because we do want to refine what we're doing and do a better job of it, and focus on areas where there is value add to what we're doing, as opposed to things that add bureaucracy to what we do. And so, and this will be an ongoing theme probably over the next year for us, maybe even a little bit longer, as we start to tackle codes, etc. That where I think that some of the problems are actually ingrained in our codes. And so it's going to take us some time to unravel that.
when would you think a good,
No, I was just going to ask, I think the same question, a good time for a workshop, and, is it one that we would have offset from a meeting, I think? Because there's a lot of things under this umbrella that can be discussed, so I don't want to shorten it unnecessarily.
Well,
Give the appropriate amount of time to discuss it in full.
I think that maybe doing a separate workshop, maybe on an off Tuesday night or something like that, if that's acceptable to the council. I think that we're talking about some of these things in terms of the work program, our internal work program, also the planning commission's work program, because anything that's in the development code that has to change does have to go through the planning commission. So having a sense about, there's some things that we know really need to be addressed quickly, because they're really problematic, and they're really, we heard from Julie, yes, we do have some challenges with our landscaping ordinance, and that's one of the reasons why, once we get past the trees, which I think the tree ordinance is one that we can, with a couple workshops with Planning Commission, we can get that in order. It's a small digestible bite, and one of the thoughts would be that we would approach these by kind of prioritizing what are the most important pieces to get through, and rather than doing everything, creating a pipeline of code amendments that are all about streamlining our processes, making us more business friendly, while still achieving the aesthetic that obviously the community values greatly.
I think that you guys have a lot on your plate, obviously, and a lot of things to play catch up upon and understand and digest of what we can and can't do. But I think there are some great ideas. You know, Jen and I were discussing some of the ideas around trees that you guys have talked about that the city council should definitely hear about sooner than later. And the city council can also bring up ideas of things that they've heard from local business owners and concerns and citizens within the city. So I'd love to have a workshop in November at some point to start to discuss some of these things so we can start.
I think the timing would be extremely valuable, and it would be extremely valuable because we are starting with the tree ordinance, and that certainly is something that, but just having some other ideas in terms of how we, and getting your input in terms of how we prioritize and shape that that's moving forward, I think would be valuable.
If I could add, my observation, share my perspective with council, because I think it's important that we understand that on the building side, we have a very sound system, very experienced, this is on private construction, on private property, very experienced building inspectors. And I think on the public works side, when we built streets and gutters and sidewalks and traffic signals and all of that, we had a really good, solid inspection. Where we really kind of fell down a little bit was in some of the landscape frontage improvements. And I know Jen's crew has recently, not always, but recently picked up inspection of Orchard Park. So I didn't want to leave the impression that things are going in Orchard Park that aren't being inspected. We do have a inspector there, and I know Jen, your crew, and Trevor and Joyce are out there watching the vegetation going in. But also I want to recognize Dr. Julie, because we've learned, we've listened, and I was in a meeting with you about a year ago. It is our frustration, my frustration, her frustration, is our landscape requirements are very, very onerous, and we want to make them better. I know Lisa wants to make them better. I know Jen wants to make them better. We heard everything you said, and we do appreciate it, because it's just sometimes when we were building our own improvements, our own medians, and our own parking lots that had landscapes, we understand exactly what you went through with bushes and trees and irrigation and all that. But if anywhere where we fell down a little bit over the years, I would say is on the inspection of the landscape side on frontage improvements, especially in a residential neighborhood. Who's inspecting that tree going in at the right depth? That's probably where we fell a little bit short, is on the landscape side, but not so much on the public work or on the building construction side. I just didn't want to leave the impression that there was a lot of gaps. And then if I could offer on the timing, I know, Lisa, you are just slammed with land uses, et cetera, et cetera. Would it be okay if it would be after the first of the year that we had these workshops? Is that okay?
Up to
Because then the budget will be behind us, but we'll have plenty of time to spend some valuable time in putting together a very effective workshop that could touch on a lot of these issues.
Yeah,
I'd just like to learn more.
but the other thing I would offer is that I'm open to hearing your feedback and input, and I know the question of the dogwood came up, and so as an example, that was one that was in chapter 8, but not in chapter 10.
I bet you that's what that was.
Crazy, anyhow.
Love it.
Lisa, I just want to say again how great it is having you on board, and the fact that we've already been able to gain so much from your experience, and just seeing what you've been able to clean up so far. I remember when Mike and I went to TLG this last spring, and I found myself saying to people, yeah, we're a fairly new city. I thought, no, we're almost 17 years old. We're growing up. And I appreciate you being here to help us grow up and to clean up some of those things that we may have been too, I don't know, OCD about maybe in the past. I'm trying to pick the right words for the public forum. And being too strict about. Now that we've gained the experience and we're getting real life feedback, it's time that we learn from that, and to have your experience in getting these things updated is just absolutely valuable. So thank you again.
Thank you, and it's an effort of the entire team, and Jen and her crew are absolutely critical to this process.
Okay, grant the council reports. I'd observe on the 9th I visited with Central Valley School District, part of the first of a monthly series of parent advisory council meetings. Ben had a chance to talk through the site selection of the recently cited now third comprehensive high school, and a very comprehensive review of that process. He'd introduced with great pause, only with great pause, to consider how the district would change what was a voter-approved project, and that they were subject to a lawsuit and a subsequent mediated settlement on the UGA boundary change. So it was really the driver for changes in the project. In the end, the staff had prepared then in advising their board 5 possibilities in order to execute the project, which included continuing on at the original 16th and Henry site, spanning between the 16th and the Sprague and Henry site. For example, track and field north, building south, and then finally the final and current location, the Henry and Sprague site. A range of costs associated with that project as well. The original project, because of its uncertainty of destination, was facing a $5 million budget overrun. And in the 5 proposed selected sites, the one selected, now the Henry and Sprague site, has a $2 million reserve against the project. For a $105 million project, that's a considerable amount to recognize. To go from deficit spending to surplus or reserve is an important decision-making process for that board. One thing I thought very valuable is that board considers, for the purpose of capital improvements, any 1-year delay in any capital project represents a 5% cost increase to the program. So that is a de facto rule used in decision-making in capital acquisition for the Central Valley School District. Regarding that new school site itself, the naming game is on. The district is accepting suggestions. So come one, come all, please provide a moment and consider what you think the name of the first new high school in the Spokane region in 20 years could be considered, and the opportunities at hand. So, that's it.
Boy, 2 comments. I know the mayor's going to push for the Chihuahuas, but I'm not sure if that's going to make it.
Yes.
That's the mascot. I'm sure you're going to be pushing for that. I would like to make a comment of this. We had a sad situation last week with our chaplain passing away. And quite a few of us, the mayor, a lot of the police officers and stuff, were able to attend the services. And it's always sad going to services, but we really go to support the family, support the friends, things of the sort. And we all go to them, but I can't recall when I've ever been to one that became so inspirational as that one. To hear about this individual, I only had an opportunity to meet on 2 occasions and visit with him just a little bit. I really wish I would have been able to get to know this individual more. I think there are very few individuals that can have such an impact as they go through life on so many individuals. To hear the people get up and speak about him and what he was able to accomplish by just being a good guy, it was absolutely outstanding. I mean, it was truly inspirational. I was so pleased to be able to attend. That's all I have. Thank you.
I have to second that, Mike. Number one is, I think John gave of himself continually. That was the message. He got involved and gave 110%. He asked him to do something, he never said no. He basically said, how can I help you? We'll work on that, we'll get it taken care of. We'll get involved, we'll do it. We'll make it happen. The second thing was, he's a great family man. It showed with his family that were at the service. But Dana, I mean, if I pass away, I want to make sure she gets my eulogy.
Right, was that something?
She was just incredible. One, great, straight from the heart. Just a wonderful lady. And so again, the attendance is John's gone. But for the family that remained behind, I mean, the services for them, and he was so well respected. The turnout was just terrific. So, good comment, Mike.
Thank you.
City Administrator report.
Mayor, members of the council, I have a very, very short report. So first, I think they're going to pull it up. It's only 3 items. Just an update on the Heights paving project. I know in the workshop, Lisa gave you a quick update, but I just want to make sure if anyone in the audience lives in the Heights neighborhood, we did have some quality control issues. Those have been identified what the solutions are, and the contractor is going to be going back out there to make those corrections. And we won't be processing any payments until everything is to our satisfaction, and the road is up to par with what we expected it to be. Poe's a good company, I do want to say that. They've done a lot of paving jobs for us, and I think they had a younger crew out there, and the older crew came back and is going to clean up some of the detail work. RCO conversion, Jen mentioned this, but just a reminder, there's the strip of land behind 4 homes in the northeast area of Rocky Hill Park. We've been working for 2 years or more, maybe even 3 years, with RCO to convert that property from city-owned parkland to private-owned property. It's not a desirable place to have public land, and so we're continuing to work on that. And finally, on the Public Works yard, Sean is working with the Central Valley School District's attorney on that transaction. Things are going well. We did hear back from them on the sports season, and it's a 7-week window in the fall for, I believe that's softball. And then 7 weeks in the spring for tennis and baseball, softball. And Jen, I don't want to steal words out of your mouth, but you think it's very manageable?
Yes, it will be tight, but we will be workable.
So the details are coming together. We do not think that we're going to make the winter in getting our fence up over there. So we have some interim possible solutions, or our last resort is just to keep it here until the spring when we can fence the site. We really can't move anything out there till we fence and put in a light. So we have some budget actions today for you to consider, but again, we're still evaluating if we want to spend some interim money putting up a temporary fence. And I'll be honest with you, right now we're leaning towards not thinking it's worth our while. So we'll go full speed ahead in the spring after the transaction's complete. And at this point in time, Sean, without putting you on the spot, I think we're looking at several weeks or months before we can wrap everything up.
Well, there's two aspects. One is the lease agreement, which will be fairly quickly, relatively speaking, being this year to occupy the space. But as far as the other aspect, a closing will probably not be until sometime after the first of the year into February, giving a boundary line adjustment that will be necessary, and then having to record that before any kind of purchase closing can occur. So that's kind of the general time frame at this point.
So in English, the annexation has to be done before we can close on the transaction.
Well, that's a separate issue.
That's a separate issue. Okay. So
I'm talking about just from that annexation portion has to be completed, but then you also then there's going to be a boundary line adjustment relative to the 3 acres that will have to occur. And then once all that's completed, then you can complete the closing of a purchase from the school district to the city.
Yeah.
That's why it's probably going to be sometime in the February timeframe.
Yeah. Okay, so that's, Mayor, that concludes my report.
Okay.
Katie, some months ago, we voted to move ahead with some project on the trailhead. Can you give us an update, anything on trailhead? I know that I saw in the minutes for the planning commission that one of the individuals was volunteered his time to be on a committee. So obviously some things are being moving ahead.
There's mention of a steering committee in the planning commission notes.
Lisa, I'm not familiar with that.
One of the individuals volunteered.
So we talked about that as part of the early discussions on the Planning Commission work program, and someone did volunteer to participate in that. When we move that forward, you'll see that the Trailhead Master Plan is in the mayor's budget and in the capital improvement plan for 2019. And so we have not done anything with that yet at this point, but it was just more of a conversation in terms of items that the Planning Commission might be interested in working on, and that was certainly one of them. And certainly the thought was that as part of that we would likely be looking for a steering committee that represented Parks and Arts, Planning Commission, as well as some other interests.
Well, because that was such a priority for the council and I think the citizens to move ahead on that, I hope that we are in the process of continuing to move. I hate to see it that Sunday gets stymied because we get preoccupied in other things.
No, I appreciate that, because the council did unanimously speak to supporting that master planning effort. And I'll be very honest with you, until Scott started, we were just really resource short. So now that he's on board, trying to wrap up Orchard Park and the Heights and a couple of projects, get through, I would say, December, and then just kind of tackle a timeline, working with the council, because I'm sure we're going to have a lot of workshops here. And bringing that back, and I'll be honest with you, in my mind, it's going to be very difficult for us to tackle it before the end of the year, Mike. And so I'm thinking it would be something we'd bring back to the council after the first of the year.
I would agree with you about the time frame. I just wanted to bring it up so we could, because I know also with the restaurant, or at least there, was through December. So we have to take that into consideration. I think that's probably a very important thing on how we're going to move ahead, if it goes to a month or something like that. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Lisa, for the workshop discussion.
Yeah, I don't see Greenstone here, so I guess I expected them to be here, so you'll have to ignore the slides that say applicant, questions for the applicant. I might have to turn this on first, that might work. Okay, so we're gonna workshop two of them today. The first, we're gonna revisit the recreational vehicle storage that we talked about in the last workshop. And as you will recall, initially the request was to include recreational vehicle storage as an allowed use in the RDM zone. And then this was what was initially proposed. And we indicated that outdoor storage was not currently permitted in any zone in the River District, and that the applicant indicated that they are getting many requests from Trutina and others, and that the proposed amendment would add a new category of RV storage in the River District zoning matrix. Again, the Planning Commission recommendation was that it not be approved, and that it was not consistent with the comprehensive plan. As you will recall at our last meeting, the applicant presented these pictures of what he envisioned happening here, and discussed that that a much more substantial landscape buffer than just this buffer that was required for outdoor storage, which was really the only applicable landscaping requirements in the code. Also talked about limiting the size of the size of these of the RV storage lots, etc.
He actually did bring out how many spaces there would be, correct?
Well, so we've gone through and we've added, we've got some proposed language. So first of all, rather than proposing recreational vehicle storage as permitted use in the RDM zone, they're now proposing that it be a conditional use. With a conditional use, there are specific standards, and we'll get to those in a second, and it does require a hearing. It is a hearing before the hearing examiner, not necessarily city council, because it is a quasi-judicial matter. But the hearing examiner's decision would be appealable to city council. No, I'm sorry, we changed that. We changed that. It now is appealable to Superior Court. So it wouldn't come to you, but it would deal with it on a case-by-case basis. So this is what we proposed for changes to the River District SAP 08-001, Section 10.2E4, which talks about conditional uses in the RDM zone. And so we would add a new number 1. These are the requirements for specific RDM zone conditional uses. So this would be recreational vehicle storage, and that the site would be enclosed by a 6-foot-high site-obscuring decorative wood, vinyl, or metal fence, or a 6-foot-high brick masonry or textured concrete wall. That it would require a minimum 10-foot wide landscaping buffer along the perimeter of the project, which shall be planted with 2 continuous rows of evergreen and deciduous trees, with trees in each row spaced 10 to 12 feet apart and then staggered so that the trees would, from one row would fall into the gap of the other. So you're really creating a total visual buffer with the trees. A minimum of 75% of the trees would be evergreen, which would maintain that buffer year-round. And the evergreen trees shall be a minimum of 6 feet in height at the time of planting. Deciduous and evergreen shrubs may also be included in the planting. C says that the interior RV parking area and landscaping shall conform to the landscaping requirements of River District SAT Article 10.3E. So that's basically, the interior parking is also going to have meet landscaping requirements that's specifically to break up the heat island effect. And then it also helps with stormwater. Finally, the capacity of the RV storage area shall be limited to 50 recreational vehicles.
Thank you.
So that was the language based upon the drawings that they came up with and what I heard from council last week, and a little bit of dancing back and forth between the applicant, but they agreed to this language. Yes, sir.
I do want to point out, because it is a little misleading from the applicant, that a large number of people have come forward with this request. If you recall at the last city council meeting, I asked how many residents were there, and he said 60. And I said, about what % have made this request? He said 10. So you're talking about 6 people out of 60 that have made this request. So keep that in mind. It's not a large amount of people swarming to have this.
Just reflecting what was.
No, I know, and it wasn't your verbiage, it was theirs, but it's slightly misleading.
I have
So-
a question.
Yes.
Lisa.
Yes, sir.
The planning commission's recommendation on this initially was that it not be approved. Has the planning commission reviewed the conditional use approach to this?
No, they have not. So there's a couple of things that you as a city council could decide. You could decide that you want to bring forward to hearing the original proposal, which you could decide that you want to bring forward this language, or you could remand this back to the planning commission, although, and I'm looking at Sean here, I think it has to go to hearing for you to decide to remand it back to the planning commission. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So those would be your 3 options. What I'm looking for you tonight, and again, keep in mind that this is, I'm not asking you for you to say how you're going to vote on it. I just want to know that we do have a provision that privately initiated applications can come forward. This due process is that it should come forward. I'm just asking the form that you'd like to see it come forward. Would you like to see the proposed language that the applicant has agreed to come forward, what I'm presenting here tonight, or would you rather just stay with the original application?
I'd like to see it with the proposed language myself.
Proposed language.
I'd say propose, though. I would not be inclined to support either one.
I have a question. Is there any other changes in the proposal? And the one specifically I'm referring to is that this was going to be open to residents and guests.
You could include that. This is the problem, and this is why I did not include this in the conditions. That is an impossible code requirement to enforce, and I'm a firm believer that you should not put anything into code that you cannot enforce.
But
The applicant had agreed to that, and he testified to that at the last workshop.
Well, what was in the last workshop is that what was going to be in there, that's what I'm asking, has that been eliminated or is that still in there? That would be open for residents and guests?
It was never in the original proposal. It's still not in this proposal because if you direct me, I will add it, but I have to forewarn you that it's not something that we can enforce.
Then how are they, because it was an issue every time that particular thing was an issue, it was brought up. You're saying that's being eliminated, so how is it being dealt with?
It's not being dealt with, I think, because it would be the homeowners association that would be owning it. I think that they would come up with their own rules for who would use it, and if there's enough demand, I would think that that the homeowners would have priority use of it. But again, if you would like to add this, we certainly can do that. And again, it wasn't the applicant that was opposed to putting it in. I was opposed to putting it in because I don't have the means to enforce it.
And I understand your point about not being able to enforce it, but what would preclude the developer or homeowner association from selling that property in the future and then it turn into a public storage? Nothing, probably?
That is true.
Thanks.
Lisa, I just want a clarification perhaps from Sean. We're acting on a development code which we'll call a land use action.
Yes.
And I want to be clear that does a land use action have anything, any clauses for the operations of a business on that property? I'm just getting to the point that I believe we're referring to the use of the land, not the business which is operated on the land.
That's the problem. That's you
I think it's
hitting
out of
the
the
nail
balance
on
of
the
the
head. That's
development
why.
code issue.
Yes,
Well,
this is a land use. This is a land use regulation. It's not
Business.
At least I think the issue that came up too was that you brought up at the last meeting relative to that issue was more of an enforcement mechanism, because you are going to have private property relative to trying to regulate that circumstance. And so I think, Dan, that's kind of probably what you may be getting at, relative to doing that. So there's going to be some difficulty in being able to enforce it in that circumstance. What I heard, and I may be wrong from the applicant, was more of trying to have a policy on their end to try to enforce it from an HOA resident versus a non-Liberty Lake, non-citizen aspect, but not necessarily have something included within the language.
exactly.
Well, I want to point out also that the applicant did say that what they would do is be charging a fee. So in essence, it is a business. They're charging a fee. It is a business. So I guess my concern at this point is that the further we get into this, the more complicated it becomes.
I have one question, Lisa. and that,
Yes, sir.
What changes for parking to storage, or storage to parking? I mean, you're talking about motorhomes here, they're parking on a parking lot, it looks like a parking lot, it acts like a parking lot. It's landscaped kind of like a parking lot with things, So, I mean, I guess to Mike's point, he talked about that, hey, we're gonna charge people, and that's a storage fee. But if you have, big unit, multi-complex apartments, condos, or whatever, and you have a big lot, what precludes them from storing their 10 or 15 motorhomes there?
So that's a good question. And in that particular case, as we talked about with the single residence, that's an accessory use, and it's not a primary use. The question was, do we have anything that allows for a primary use of recreational vehicle storage? And the answer is no.
I'm just taking from the homeowners association, let's say Tutina, the board of directors there. They have this parking lot, and you pay your homeowners dues or whatever, and you pay your condo dues or whatever. You're provided first come, first served storage or parking with your motorhome on this lot. What difference?
Well, so again, if the question is whether or not we have public parking in the zoning, and I'm not certain that we do have provisions for public parking in the River District. I would have to, I'm sorry, I'd have to look at the matrix.
The people own the property. Yeah, that's what I'm.
But if it's solely used for the purpose of parking, that's a sole use as opposed to an accessory use. So, again, I don't know. I can go back and check.
I'm going back to the applicant's statement. It says we have a number of people, and this is what I heard. And people are different. We have a number of people in Tutina would like to be closer to their motorhome vehicle that they bought at R&R RV. And so that they can just walk out their door and be in it, or walk within a block and be in it.
The problem is, it's not a permitted use in the zone, in the residential zone. And secondly, we have the testimony of Charles Matthews from the Planning Commission that there are plenty of parking places for residential vehicles nearby in the community. So I just don't really see any compelling reason to change that zoning and use.
I understand, and so the purpose of the workshop tonight was to answer any questions that you may have and to get some direction from you as to what we bring forward to the hearing. And again, I need that direction for purposes of noticing. I have to be able to say what the text amendments are at the time we notice it. Having said that, these are all valid concerns and comments and discussion that should come out at the hearing and basis for you to do. And again, I will remind you again at the hearing, you have the ability to approve, to amend the proposed language, deny it, or remand it. And those are all valid options.
Sounds
But-
like most everybody was saying to take a look at the revised language. Is that what I heard?
Yeah.
And so that's what I'll bring forward again. If you have amendments to that, you can address that at the hearing as well. Thank you for that direction. As I said, please ignore the questions of the applicant.
Okay.
And and then we have,
Minimum
there we
maximum.
go. So we also have a workshop on the third amendment, which was the amendment to eliminate minimum and maximum lot areas in the R2 zone. Now this identifies all of the R2 zones, but for purposes of this, and I don't have the pointer with me, the Rocky Hill North is the only one of these four areas that's not built out. So it really would only apply there. And this, I apologize for the size of this, but basically it shows that we're just eliminating the minimum and maximum lot areas on the chart within the
Lisa, does this affect Rocky Hill North Phase 3 and 4, or just Phase 4?
I believe Phase 3 is just about built out. It probably wouldn't, I mean, the lots are already platted, so it wouldn't make much of a difference as it relates to Rocky Hill 3rd. 4th, the final plat is going forward. Again, it's already platted. It probably wouldn't affect anything until Rocky Hill North 5th edition.
Phase 4.
Phase 5. Phase 4 is coming to you probably next council meeting, based upon the old regulations. So again, the thought is that this provides for a different concept with aggregated open space, etc., the cottage housing kind of concept that you, in fact, there's a great example in Kendall Yards of that. Right now, in R2, the minimum density is 6 units per acre, and the maximum density is 12 units per acre. With a minimum lot size of 5,000 square feet, the developer can create at most 8 single-family lots of 5,000 square feet under the current regulations, with 3,560 square feet of shared open space per acre. That's the most you can get out of it. With no minimum lot size, the developer couldn't exceed the 12 single-family lots. But if the lots were only 2,000 square feet, you could have consolidated 19,000 square feet of open space per acre. So it's a different way to, it's not so much that you would increase the density as you would be able to have greater latitude in creating usable open space. the planning commission did recommend that it be approved and found it to be consistent with the comprehensive plan, warranted by change in economic, technological, or land use conditions, and that the proposed amendment is deemed necessary as being in the public interest because of the changes in market demand for this type of product. Anyhow, it would create greater flexibility in the R2 zone. It allows for greater variety of housing products. Density requirements, lot coverage, provisions, and setbacks would still limit the intensity of the development. And this is, I think, an important point. Currently, there's no minimum or maximum lot areas in the RDR, RDM, or RDC zones in River District. And it's not that you're necessarily getting anything different. I think you would have the potential to see more of a Trutina type of development. But at the end of the day, I think what they're doing in the River District is consistent with the comprehensive plan for sure, and that's what it would allow. The last thing, since the original workshop that we did on August 21st, we did get a letter from the Department of Commerce supporting this and actually identifying this as a best practice. And I've identified two of the quotes from the letter, which is in your packet. Commerce considers the practice of governing density directly rather than relying on minimum lot size as a best practice in the implementation of your plan. Underlying density requirements remain in your code, but this allows more flexibility while remaining consistent with your comprehensive plan densities. They also say that by removing prescriptive lot sizes, property owners get a clearer picture of the number of lots they can create during subdivision. Subdivision development can then focus on design considerations rather than maximizing lot yield. So that from the Department of Commerce. So with that, no more questions for the applicant, but I can answer questions if you have any of me. Yes, sir.
Yes, I have a question. If this is approved, it will still permit a density of 12 units, building or residential units per acre. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And right now, the code permits 12 building units, residential units per acre. Is that correct?
The comprehensive plan calls for a minimum of 8 units per acre and a maximum of 12 units per acre. It's actually challenging, or 6 units, I'm sorry. It's actually challenging with minimum lot sizes to actually hit your minimum densities.
Yeah, I spent 5 years on the planning commission, as you know, and we talked about density a lot in development. And I think you're right. I think that it was a way to control density by establishing lot sizes. Now, there are other ways to do that, to control density and accommodate the developer. And this is developer-initiated change. Ways to do that are with a specific area plan or with a plan unit development. Okay? And if there is a desire to do something creative, I would suggest that those are the ways to do that. It's a creative way with working with the city and the code and the Growth Management Act and Development Code, Comprehensive Plan, all those things. You can do that with specific area plan or a planned unit development. And why we don't approach that as opposed to just doing away altogether with the existing regulations. So that would be my suggestion. And why wouldn't the developer be willing to do that? They could come up with a development plan that's going to be creative, maybe like the one downtown. And what's the name of it? Yeah.
So I will share with you, and I've heard this from developers, not so much here, but in other communities, that the planned unit development has an added layer of process and bureaucracy and cost to develop. And it's It's actually, very few developers today are using the planned unit development because it's too unpredictable.
We have two specific area plans in Liberty Lake right now. Yeah, we have the River District, and we have, what is it called now? Stonehill, yeah, Stonehill. So we have two already. So what's the developer's problem with utilizing specific area plan development?
I suspect that it has to do with the fact that Rocky, and this is, you should really be asking the applicant that. And you'll get a chance to at the hearing. But Rocky Hill North has already received preliminary plat approval. They're still limited to the total number of lots that was approved, unless they come back for an amendment to that plat. And I think that what they really are looking at is not to create additional lots, but just to be able to do different configurations of lots to respond to the market. That, again, that's what I believe from my conversations with Kevin.
But also, there's a possibility of increasing densities.
Most of the lots are already set.
So most of the lots are already set. There is, there is the balance of Rocky Hill North that hasn't been platted yet, so it would be Fifth and Beyond. And they would still be tied to the number of lots that was approved in the preliminary plat. So they wouldn't necessarily be increasing the density. They would just be looking for greater latitude and configuration. And if they wanted to increase the number of lots, they'd actually really have to go back through the hearing examiner again for a preliminary, for an amendment to the plat.
Thank you.
So, will you bring this forward in the hearing then?
I will, yes, I will bring that forward in the hearing. We will have this will be noticed, and we'll have your day with the applicant on November 6th. Thank you.
Okay. For action items.
I move consent agenda 1 and 2 to approve October 2nd, 2018 City Council minutes, and also to approve October 16th, 2018 vouchers in the amount of $1,356,826.37.
Second.
Moving second, discussion. I have one discussion, okay? And that was on the SPP bill for $4,600. Can you explain that?
I would love to. So SPVB is our landscape architect that put together the design documents, construction documents for Orchard Park, and we all know the situation with the budget. It has not gone extremely well. During the course of the transition with Andrew's departure and Dennis taking over the contract, we really tried to use their services a minimal amount, because we felt that there was just our ability to manage certain things. However, during the course of construction, there's things called construction administration, and so Dennis had questions of them. So we called them and asked them questions. When we were redesigning the drainage area around the perimeter of the splash pad, the engineer that was helping us do that, that didn't charge us, called them to ask them for some of their grading documents and site plans. So we have a contract with them to pay them for an hourly rate for services rendered, and we haven't used them anymore since this billing. We met with one of their principals who was in charge of this project, and we were very frank with him. We told him the project has not gone well, very disappointed in the gap between the scope and the budget, and would he be willing to relook at his charges and resubmit a bill. We got an email back, it's in your packet, I believe, and they declined to adjust their bill. So I've put it on here. We do have a contract with them to pay them. They did provide these hours of service, so it's a legitimate billing. However, if the council doesn't want to approve it, then I could fully understand and respect that. So It's $4,300 and some dollars. We've asked them to make adjustments, and they've declined to do so.
Will we be using their loan in the future, or how do we limit?
All contracts for their services would come before the council.
Thank you.
Is there a standing contract which can be reconsidered?
We we released the contract that we had that allowed for this service. So they asked to be released from the service. They're actually they had to carry professional, I think it's called errors and omission insurance, so they wanted to be released from their contract, and we released them.
Question, what will be the ramifications if we don't approve?
They will probably, we have an attorney, Sean, if we don't pay them. Yeah.
I guess the question is what's the language in that contract talking about remediation or?
No, so I don't believe that there is mediation. Sean, I can go back and look.
I don't recall the contract off the top of my head, I haven't seen it really in a while, so.
We did ask them, so let me be very clear. They spent hours of work that we requested, or our engineer requested, to answer questions about the documents for the project that was under construction. So it's going to be,
Well, apparently it wasn't that clear for somebody to understand, so this, I guess what I would do is, rather than pay that bill tonight, I would pull it off, and I would review the contract to see if there's any.
that is absolutely fine.
What's the check number? I'll make the motion.
Check number is 26812.
I move to pull check number 26812 from tonight's consent agenda for further consideration and review by our attorney.
Second.
We got third on that. Move to second, further discussion. Not hearing all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
There you go, okay. So then the motion is still the floor for the approval of this, plus that check, right?
Correct. So I move consent agenda number 2 to approve October 16, 2018 vouchers in the amount of minus what we just discussed, $1,356.826, and 37 cents.
Second.
Moved and seconded, further discussion. Not hearing all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
There you go.
Move general business number 1 to confirm Mayor Peterson's appointment of Sandra Bishop as a Liberty Lake Municipal Library Board trustee.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Sandra, she's here with us.
Yes.
I think her husband was here, right? Is that what she said?
Yes, thanks.
We'll take a picture, there you go.
They're new residents to Liberty Lake. They've lived here a year and came from
Sandra was our applicant for the library trustee.
Yeah.
She's just a delightful lady, and she's had a great deal of experience that I think will really benefit our library. So tell them about yourself, Sandra, because I had the opportunity.
Okay, we have lived in Liberty Lake now for 14 months. My husband is a native of Spokane. We grew up South Argonne, off Boone, went to West Valley High School and wanted to come back for family and fishing, and I came along. I spent 28 years in the public schools as a teacher, administrator, and a tech specialist. And then I spent 15 years in the private sector in corporate America with McGraw-Hill Publishing. So I have an understanding of what publishing entails. Literacy is a passion of mine, but also developing community. And this particular municipal library has that very unique feature of doing both. And I'm very excited to work with Carol and Lou and the rest of the team, and Jocelyn, the new director. So,
Welcome.
Thank you. I'm honored.
She'll be delightful. So, without further discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye. I move general business number 2 to approve the purchase of materials for two pedestrian crossings in the amount of $23,501.94.
Second.
Moving to second, discussion. Hearing all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Move general business number 3 to approve parametrics task order 2018-017 in the amount of $26,500 regarding Mission Avenue, River District Road widening and pedestrian improvements.
Second.
Further discussion? Hearing all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? There you go.
General business number 4, to approve parametrics engineering services for public works yard improvements on Henry Road in the amount up to $32,490. Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion?
Yes. I would like to, I'm certainly in favor of proceeding with this Public Works project. However, I would really like to know what the overall plan is and what the cost is going to be. I looked at the plan that we have in the budget, and it's somewhat ambiguous, but I want to know what the final bottom line cost of the thing is. Whether it's over, you do over 5 years, or 10 years, or however long it takes. What's the bottom line? What's the cost going to be? And I saw a figure of $1.5 million or something like that, but I don't know what's included in it. I'd like to know what the project.
Great question. So that's why we have this task order. So part of this task order is to put together a site plan. It's basically the site plan, the utilities that will have to be extended, it's fencing, it's all of those things. But to answer your question of what this gets us, what we call preliminary engineering, to get a site plan with a final budget number, so that over the course of time, as the site builds out, we can allocate a certain amount of dollars. I'll be honest with you, we need to get that number for you guys so you know what it is. But this is not a site that needs to be built out day one. I've had lots of conversation with Jennifer and her crews, but we do want to give you the fully loaded cost of what it's going to cost. And the spending of this contract helps you get that number.
I also noticed that it indicated that there was going to be a 5,000 square foot facilities on there. Is that correct?
So that is the feedback we're getting from our street crew, but that is all going to be, reviewed under this contract to see how many square feet do we really need.
Okay, very good. I think we should proceed now. Thank you.
Thank you.
I missed last week for a family thing, so I know there were some discussions that I missed and more on the recording, so we are fairly confident that our agreement for the land is going to move forward, because what I hate to do is spend this money on something that falls through.
Yeah, so we talk to Central Valley probably every other day about this transaction, and Sean,
I'd say we're confident that it's going to occur. So we don't have, at this point, we don't have any reservations that there would be a problem with not moving forward in the direction that we've agreed upon.
Great, thank you.
Comment? I would also like to echo Bob's concern. I have the same concerns as it. In all honesty, I think it's somewhat to the point that council members at times don't have a lot of confidence in what the dollar amount is going to be, because we're told certain dollar amounts, and it always comes in substantially more. The Heights was $130,000 more. The ball field was $400,000 to $500,000 more. The Orchard Park was $2 million more, and it's never less, it's always more. And I understand it's a moving target. I've been in business all my life, I understand totally how that works. But when we miss it so far, every time, it's difficult to get confidence, and also for our citizens to have confidence when they hear it's going to be X number of dollars and it comes in substantially more. So, just to reiterate Bob's comments.
Well, I'd like to, just point out that it's not every project. There have been plenty of projects in the city in my almost 9-year tenure now that have come in plenty under budget. So I know there are several out there that haven't, and they tend to stick out to us, but that's generally not the case.
yeah, generally, so if I could add, because this has kind of been my life career, and building projects and delivering public facilities, amenities has been something that I'm very dedicated to, and I think there's a couple of things. There's not one answer, but Orchard Park is just a really bad, I know it happened, and I think what happens though, we don't give you fully loaded costs, so when we give you construction costs, design costs, contingency, and staff costs, inspection, consulting charges, we as an organization need to give you fully loaded costs, so that there isn't, oh, that doesn't include this, or hey, it didn't include the permit, or it didn't include the TIs, or it didn't include something, inspection services, whatever. So we need to give you fully loaded costs. That's part one. The other is, as an organization, I use the term discipline, but you have to really be disciplined on your scope and your budget and reconcile those. Because what happened in Orchard Park is the budget and the scope were not in alignment. They were out of whack. We had too much scope and not enough budget, or we had too little budget for the scope we had, whichever way you wanted to look at it. And that was one of the key points that we pointed out to SPVV is we end up with a project that we couldn't afford. So anyway, be that as it may, I hear what you're saying, and I know Lisa does too. We really put a lot of effort into that number that you saw in the budget, because it is fully loaded and it has all those extra costs that I talked about. It's not just the construction of the site improvements, it's also the professional services needed to deliver that. I will also say though that our own, and there might be some people in the audience that love hearing this, but our own design requirements for landscaping are driving some of these costs. And what kind of structure we can put on that building is driving some of these costs. So I just wanted to share that with you.
I appreciate what you're saying. I certainly agree with what Chris is saying, that there's a lot of things that we do the right things on. But our citizens, they don't pay attention to those. They paid attention to the ones that will be really missed, and we miss big time.
Yeah, so Appleway is an example of one that came in budget. The Trailhead irrigation system, Liberty Lake Road, the roundabout at Mission and Moulter, all of those were within our budget that got approved, so I just had to throw some in.
Okay, any other discussion? Not hearing any, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? There you go.
Move general business number 5 to authorize Mayor Peterson to sign an approved donation form for the Family Pieces sculpture.
What is that? I had a card down. Did you want to talk about this again? So, further discussion?
I'd just like to know, what some of the alternatives are, where we're going to put it. Do we have any place in the city?
The Parks and Arts Commission they're gonna make recommendations.
They're going to come up with a recommendation. Because I love the price.
Yes, the price is right.
The price is
And I've heard it's an indoor and outdoor piece of art, so, and it's valued at $26,000, and it's being donated.
We need to put a camera on it.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's lifting that.
Anyway, further discussion, not hearing any, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? There you go. We're at the public hearing, RJ.
So just a few
Oversight overview on the budget. You all got your binders for you to review. I did, just so you know, in the budget binders, I did add to the detail. We not only have kind of the Excel spreadsheet that we do that what I call collapses all the programs so you don't have to go searching for the money, but I also included the bias programs behind it where you do go have to search for the money. So I tried to add a little bit more detail. Added a few more pages to the budget. It's not 500 pages, it's 135. It's still a lot. But in that, just a few things I want to point out. So tonight we have the presentation. The budget will be on our website tomorrow. We'll do a push notification and Facebook feed so that people, citizens know that's there in all of its entirety. We do have, including tonight's public hearing on the budget, there will also be 2 more public hearings during the month of November related to the budget. We also have the property tax resolution that comes over in November as well, and those will be 2 public hearings for those as well. The major mayor budget questions, those forms I sent out to you all on Friday. So I did get 2 already, so from Councilman Moore. coming to budget questions, so I get to start working on those. So I encourage you all, as especially as we want to meet on the 30th, if you have some that you come up with right away, or if there's specifics that we want to dive into on the 30th, the more heads up I have, the better prepared I can be. Let's look at. And then the looking at council approval for the budget, we have first read and second read on the budget ordinance in December, the 14th and 18th. So, what new in this budget? It says capital improvements plan, I should say capital facilities plan. That's my error. Now, page 119 of the budget starts that capital facilities plan. This is new. This is kind of exciting. And a lot of work. We spent a lot of work trying to make sure we tie what's in this plan and it's in the budget. And it's a long, drawn-out page. It's 4 pages, and it's a
Looks
lot of
like
detail
this.
to come to flow through. But on there, you'll see your council priorities, and you'll see the positioning of them and what subject matter they are, where they fall. And then you'll see those, as we discussed, about the loaded or the full cost of like the public works yard, which I will agree on. That's a large number. And right up to Friday, we were questioning those and making sure we got the right years expanded out. On page 123, I took all that information and I condensed it down. This really started from me because I needed my own notes to figure out where, make sure all this money was accounted for, that they had in there. But on page 123 is a quick summary for you of $5.8 million projects, where to find them in the budget, where are they located, which fund. What's different in this budget too is since Orchard Park is done this year, it frees up REIT dollars, and we're looking to be reimbursed for the Orchard Park. So REIT has funding to do some of these large projects that are listed on that page.
What page was that,
123. So after those large 4 pages of there's this quick reference guide that summarizes it all.
The format on those 4 pages is very good.
Yeah, and it was great for me to work with. I haven't had that tool to tie into the budget, so it's really great collaborative effort because it's a lot of what we've discussed here for this entire year, working with Lisa on her putting those together. She's probably done 58 versions of that plan within the last 2 weeks. So, what's also new on page 29, the organization structures changed from this year to last. We condensed the planning and engineering. There used to be 2 separate sections in there, and we condensed them down. We've also increased our FTE compared to 2018-19 by 5. One of those we brought in this year, Kelsey, our office assistant for the planning department. We're proposing 4 new FTE for 2019. I'm going to go through those here in a second. And then on page 83, you have the fund, the Parks and Art Fund. And this fund includes the proposed public art events, including Barefoot, 4th of July, and something. So those look like a transfer from general fund to fund this one, as projects listed there. All good. All right. So going into what's new on here on staffing. So I mentioned increasing by 5 FTE with ones in place. So the 4 new ones is the 1 new police officer, and then we're proposing 3 new FTE in the operation and maintenance. One of those is really a mechanical assistant to help with our current mechanic and all the equipment that we have, especially with the new park going on. Another one is a parks and events person to help with all the scheduling that we have to do. We had an intern this year to help with Barefoot and Park. Was very beneficial and useful for staffing, and then another maintenance crew member.
As a point of clarification, Chief, for the 1 new officer, this is bringing another officer onto the department, but we're still having to backfill a position, so we're technically getting 2.
He needs to
Budget-wise, it's only accounting for 1, but we're actually getting 2.
Yes.
Just
Yeah,
want to
and
make sure.
actually, we're running 1 low this year.
Yeah,
so.
just want to make sure everyone understood that.
And just for anyone else that wants to be a police officer, I think the advertisement for applications accepted up to Friday.
Friday at 5 o'clock.
Bye.
Oh, there you go, you found retirement.
Can we turn in somebody's resume?
What?
Somebody's resume, kind of like when you're not there, turn in the resume for a police officer? And just get a copy of Tom's.
Very hard. We probably already have his information somewhere with
We don't,
volunteer.
yeah, age isn't a problem.
And then,
Tom, I'm telling you.
for salary, we're looking, so those are eligible, those are the ones that are in the budget. For all full-time staff, we're looking at 50 cents per hour. It says hours, it should be hour, increase per employee. So we have, looking at the impact of I-1433 on our hourly, or our minimum wage employees. We're seeing that starting to buffer up against other employees, and we have this ripple effect up. We're thinking 50 cents per hour just across the board, about $1,000 a year for full-time employees, and that'll help benefit because it increases from $12 an hour to $13.50 next year. So they can have a.
Have you calculated what percentage that increase is? Is it like
Yeah,
a 2 or 3%?
Yeah, it depends on where you're at in the salary scale. So for someone higher up, it's only more like a percentage, 1%. But someone more down, it actually equates to about 2%, almost exactly.
On the average?
On the average, almost exactly 2%. So
thank you.
And then the police officers also had an increase through the union contract. So they have a 6-year contract, and I think we're near 3. Yeah, halfway through. So on page 27, and I'm the bottom line person on your budget. So if you look at page 27, you're going to look at total revenues, and this is all 25 funds. It's just a little over 16 million, and when you look over at total expenses, we're expending 17 million, or 17.3. And that difference is 1.2 million. So the first question I ask, what makes up that difference? And one of the big things for you to know is the Harvard Road, so this is a special fund for the Harvard Road Bridge widening and the I-90 off-ramp. We collected $800,000 from WashDOT actually this week. So it's in our bank accounts, and that goes to help pay for design. This design is going to carry over into 2019. So one of the big deficits that you're looking at is for money that we've already collected. We already have that we're going to spend in 19. So it's not a huge nexus in there. The other main difference, and we have a lot of funds, some are growing, some are not, but I isolated general fund and streets at about $261,000. And I want you to know revenues, and one of the BQ questions of being maybe too conservative. The revenue estimates are conservative. We typically have in the last few years collected more. You'll see sales tax. It's budgeted, I think, at 3.2. We're going to collect 3.4 this year. So why am I not pushing up 3.4? Because I just don't know enough. And a lot of this is from new construction. And then expenses, I use the word conservative, but we typically come under what we say we're going to budget, like 97, 98%. And then we have about $160,000 in one-time costs included in this budget as well.
RJ, did you take into consideration any potential sales tax increase, like from the school, since they're breaking ground in the spring for the high school and those kind of things yet?
I didn't program that in there, but yes, that is something to consider. I have a feeling that when we get down that far, that there might be things that pop up that we may have to react to. And that'd be the budget amendment once we know more coming in. Because right now we expect them to break ground spring, but I don't know if they are or not.
Yeah,
So,
I don't want to counter
but
chickens
that
before
is,
they hatch, but it's good to have that in the back of our head, because I know we've had some estimates of what that dollar will be, and obviously it'll be spread over more, it'll go past
over a
19.
period of time, and I think in that instance, we want to be kind of strategic in how you want to use the money. That's truly just one-time money.
Yeah.
And how you want to use it.
Right.
Absolutely.
So, it's a great question. We can call them all sorts of things.
There's one for Chris.
So, quickly on the property tax. So the budget does include the 1% increase, and I want you to know that 1% increase is just slightly over $24,000. We stayed on the property tax, covers the library and a portion of PD. There's the graph on page 36 that shows that bucket graph between how revenues are coming in and what the departments split. So you can look at color coded. As Mayor stated earlier, our current levy rate is $1.59 per thousand. In 2019 estimated rate right now is coming in at $1.47 per thousand. So we're seeing a 12% drop, and that is due to growth that we're seeing in this city. So it is a 12% drop.
Does that include that 1% in its projection?
That does include 1%.
Thank you.
Without the 1%, it's like 1.46.
And then on the average house, RJ, we calculate, are you getting to that slide?
You know, I didn't do that slide. I was going to say it for November because
Oh, okay. So,
I start going way down those. But
okay,
but
you come back, we have
an
a,
example of if you have a house that's about $300,000, you got a couple things moving through this. Is you would see in this scenario and I actually looked at the house. Your city
$4
portion
per
of your
year.
taxes is $450, just the city portion. Right. Knowing your bill is probably closer to $4,000, but just the city portion is $450 this year. Next year, looking at this projection, it'd be $444. So it would drop by $6. 36.
I'm glad you saved that good news to the end.
so on the average house, it's $4 a year.
So that's the 1%.
That's the 1%. Equates to $4 per year on the city side of the equation.
But of course,
But the overall drop
it's about 30.
is bigger.
But the big thing that we always hear, and I try my best to, we hear this a lot on the Facebook pages, okay, everybody gets that their rate is going down for Liberty Lake, but everybody's house values are going up. So we can say, it might be a $36 savings, but what's out of our hands, obviously, is the property valuation. And that's what, people look at the bottom line dollar overall, regardless of what the rate
We hear that
is.
a lot on Saturdays at the farmer's market.
So in RJ's scenario though,
Yeah.
he took an appreciation of $20-some thousand on this house and applied this, and their taxes still went
City
down,
portion still drop.
correct,
Still drop.
after the 20,000 appreciation.
And it'll be interesting to see when people actually get their property tax statements, because the state legislature has put something in place to drop the whole levy rate that they have for state school by 30 cents for 1 year.
Yeah.
And then there's supposed to be the cap on the local school district levy. So people should see overall a reduction. So you should be getting great news at next year's farmer's market. Thank you for lowering my tax.
Larger than the $6 you just laid on us?
Now, all right, so this is, this is not updated to 2019, because I don't know what all these other cities, other than the Valley, is going to do. But this is looking at the slide to say that we're $1.59 this year, and we're going to be $1.47. What I do know is that we're going to be $1.47 up here. The Valley is predicting about $1.29, so they're dropping about 7 cents. We're dropping 12. Our valuation growth is higher than the Valley, so overall. I don't know what the other ones done yet because they haven't published anything.
I'm sorry, RJ, so the Valley's,
The Valley's rate's going to go down from $1.36 to $1.29, but you buy at the library, they're still higher.
okay,
They're part of the Spokane County Library District.
correct. So they're still higher than we are,
Yes,
and so is the county.
yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And then this is just to show that of the total taxes is that we are 12% of the total tax bill.
I have one question. I looked through the whole budget and everywhere else, and I couldn't find out what our population number is right now.
10,390, and that.
10,390.
10,390. Did I just miss it?
I don't call it out, and that is something that is a great idea to have in there, to post it, so we'll add that in there. If you look really hard, you would find that number in the property tax ordinance. That would actually state that.
What does it actually work,
What?
It's easier to ask you.
Yeah, isn't it?
We're going to take your word for it, because we're not going to look for it.
Well, anyway, I'm sorry. Any questions?
No, thank you for.
Thanks, RJ. Thanks, RJ. Good job.
Actually, RJ was one of the best budgets I've ever seen put together, so. With that said, have the opportunity to have our first public hearing on the preliminary budget. And we invite invite any public comment. Public hearing's open at 9:07. So if you have any comments, I'll save it for later on, because we'll have, I think, two more here tonight. So this is just the first one. Anybody to look at the budget on the website, we can also get you a hard copy if you need one. With that simple, close it 9:08. Resolution number 18235, RJ.
Resolution 18235, a resolution providing for the disposal of certain inventory items deemed to be surplus to the reasonable foreseeable needs of the city of Liberty Lake, Washington.
Mayor, I move resolution number 18-235.
Second.
Move in second. Discussion. Not hearing, all in favor, raise your right hand. I count 6 out of 6, is that correct? It's adopted. First read ordinance, RJ.
Ordinance number 250, ordinance of the City of Liberty Lake, Washington, authorizing the payment of claims or other obligations granting city officers signature authority on checks for such payment and repealing any ordinance in conflict.
Second read ordinance,
I would actually, on this one, I would request, because this is switching from US Bank to Banner, and that's effective November 1st, that we would suspend the rules.
I move to suspend the rules for second.
Move in second, we suspend the rules. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
There we go. So now it's the second read ordinance, RJ.
Yeah, so ordinance number 250, an ordinance of the City of Liberty Lake, Washington, authorizing the payment of claims or other obligations granting city officers signature authority on checks for such payments and repealing any ordinance in conflict.
I move ordinance number 250.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. Not hearing any public comment on ordinance number 250. Not hearing any, all in favor, raise your right hand. It's adopted. Count 6 out of 6, correct? And the second read ordinance, RJ, number 247E.
Ordinance number 247E, an ordinance amending ordinance number 247 passed by the City Council on December 21st, 2017, entitled An Ordinance of the City of Liberty Lake, Washington, adopting a budget for the period January 1st, 2018 through December 31st, 2018, appropriating funds and establishing salary schedules for established positions.
I move ordinance number 247E.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. Not hearing, all in favor, raise your right hand. All citizens comments. None, all in fact, right hand, and I count 6 out of 6. It's adopted. Introduction of upcoming items.
So our next council meeting is November 6th. We have approved a bias annual software agreement. We have 1, 2, 3 public hearings. One is on our 2019 budget. One will be on the maximum and minimum lot size and the RV storage. We'll have a public hearing on the Central Valley School District annexation. We will not have Trutina, but we will have Rocky Hill 4. Is that correct? And then we have a first read ordinance adopting annexation ordinance with comprehensive plan, land use designation and zoning and an effective date. Is that correct? Yeah, so lots of hearings.
That's it, so, without further ado, we're adjourned. Citizens
Citizen comments?
Comments? No, now we're adjourned.